First, I gotta turn my phone off.
It won't go on, so I shut it down, and now it's just spinning.
Good evening, this is the Littleton Zoning Board of Appeals. It is Thursday, June 21st, 2018. It's 7:15 PM. We're in room 103 at 37 Shattuck Street. We have three regular board members and two alternates, so tonight the alternates will become the voting alternates, so we'll have a five-member board all night. Mr. Saucier might be late, and I might rotate him in for one or two of the hearings later. Also, I wanted to congratulate those of you who got sworn in and appointed again by the selectmen. So it was Cheryl Hollinger and Jillian Shaw and Kitty were all reappointed by the Board of Selectmen for another term.
Did anyone watch that meeting?
Congratulations. No,
I want you to know I sang everyone's praises.
as one would hope, it's a wonderful board.
We are a well-balanced board.
Okay, the first thing
But we're
is
polite. We don't
7
disagree, but we're polite.
7:15 PM administrative matters. We have some mail to sign. Does anyone have any discussion items that they want to bring up? One of the things is that every year we have to vote for accounts payable and who's authorized to sign them. We're supposed to take action at this meeting to decide how many numbers of signatures are required and which specific members are required to sign off or approve of bills. Typically, the Zoning Board of Appeals has no bills except what we have to do by law, which is advertising in the newspaper, postage,
Seminars.
and seminars. The salaries are paid as part of the town budget, so we don't sign off on those.
In the
Tip-
past, haven't we made our signature our clerk?
Typically, in the past, it's always been the chair or the clerk, because I'm usually here, so I sign them when we're here at the meetings. But I think it would be okay or fitting to vote chair, clerk, or vice chair can sign, and that way whoever is at the meeting can sign when Shelley brings them in.
So moved.
So moved. Can I have a second on that motion?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, do you want me to just write that right on here? Chair, vice chair, or
You guys might as well move on over.
clerk?
I told Matt he didn't want to. He was happy to sit.
Okay, and right now I have a community news approval to pay, which I'm signing. I have the Sun approval to pay, which I'm signing. And that's it.
But we always pass those costs on to our applicants anyway.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a very low budget. We haven't looked at our application fees in a long time, but the budget that we submitted to town meeting looked fine, so I don't think we need to raise any application fees at this point in time. Okay. It is a second or two ahead of time. I'm going to wait 1 second because there is a hearing that we have abutters present for that we need to open on time. Anybody else want to report on anything that's going on that they participated in or saw? I did attend that housing, I forget what it was called now, but it was the Massachusetts seminar on housing options. And we had been fortunate enough to have the same presenter the night before present to the planning board, so I heard it 2 days in a row. I think mostly it was what Gino's been speaking of, and that is more available housing for the elderly and more options for senior housing as we go through the process of aging in our communities and wanting to stay in place. It's very interesting that the state is trying to do more of that, and this town seems to be supporting efforts to find the funds to work with the state, find the properties to work with the state, so. I hope it'll be a little more aggressive. I think of your name synonymous with senior housing, and you've done a great deal in this community, make us aware of
Put my
it.
name on it when they build the house.
Yeah, okay.
I tell the state, you better put my name on it. Gino Pavelis.
They've misspelled it, huh?
No, they will not misspell that, because I will write it for them.
Okay. It is 7:20 PM. I'm going to open the continued hearing of case number 893A. The petitioner is ENI 25 King Street LLC. Its request for a special permit and/or variance pursuant to Section 173-26A Commercial Uses Restaurant footnote 4 for a proposed drive-through window as an accessory use to the existing convenience store Dunkin' Donuts, 25 King Street. Now, the hearing is opened, the continued hearing is opened. It has been opened 2 or 3 meetings in a row, and each time...
Three to third.
This will be the third. Each time the applicant has requested a continuance. This most recent time, we received a letter from Gallant and Irvin, the attorney for the applicant, which says, "Please accept this letter as a formal request for approval from the board to withdraw the special permit and various application for 25 King Street without prejudice. Please call me if you have any questions." It is the right of any applicant to withdraw without prejudice. It's up to the board to vote for it or not vote for it. The idea being that if they withdraw without prejudice, they can bring it back again at another time. But because I have not let anyone in this room who came to at least 2 meetings, I think a third meeting, speak, and the abutters have come 3 times in a row, I would like to hear from the abutters, even though there's no applicant presenting, because I want the board to hear your sentiments. If we decide to allow withdrawal without prejudice, we will be forewarned of what the neighborhood opposition might be.
Can't we discuss it before we allow it to be withdrawn, too?
We can
After
discuss
hear
it before we allow
We
it to be
can,
withdrawn.
okay.
Lady first.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ann Lawrence, 18 Harwood. I live at the corner of Harwood and Kimball. And I have 3 major concerns about the area: traffic, parking, and trash. So this afternoon, an 18-wheeler came up Kimball Street from down below, up Kimball Street, made a left-hand turn onto Harwood Avenue, and 2 cars coming along had to stop because he couldn't make the turn. He made the turn and parked in front of Gino's house, backed up to in front of my house, and went back down Kimball Street. We have become a major truck rotary. They're taking out lawns, they're taking out road edges.
What's your address?
Say it again.
What's your address? 18 Harwood.
Harwood. So I have a real problem about traffic. Trash. On Town Community Cleanup Day, one of the volunteers spent her entire time at the driveway that goes out onto Kimball Street, and there's a transformer box there on a telephone pole. So we call it the transformer pole. She spent her entire time, which is maybe 3, maybe 4 hours, there, picking up trash. In the end, her husband came to help her and her 2 children. I can't tell you how much trash they picked up. Bags, just, I don't know, 4 bags, 5 bags. We're not talking a straw and a napkin. We're talking bags of trash. Parking. There is a no truck parking sign on the King Street entrance. So I don't know what they're gonna do about, I mean, I don't know if trucks use drive-throughs or not. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to get off and get through and get out again. The access from 2A onto Kimball Street, if they're going that way, if you're coming from Air, the access to Kimball Street is like a hairpin turn. Nobody can do it. If they turn on King Street and then they want to get into the garage area at 8 o'clock in the morning, impossible. That's all. Traffic, trash, parking.
Thank you.
And they also have been parking on my property. I had a MART bus park on my property one morning. No wheels were on the pavement. All 4 wheels were on my yard. Somebody had snapped.
Thank you.
I'm
And
sorry that's
relative to the
happening.
parking, you may wish to ask the police or selectmen to post the street. I saw that they put no parking, or they're orange signs that say temporary signs for no parking, but all along Charles Street, whenever there's an event at the Shaker Lane School, they have to post it for the same reason. You might ask the police to do that. But thank you for that input. I'm sure your sentiments are reflected by many.
You could also, can I?
Yes, go ahead.
You could also ask the highway department, the selectmen, for a sign that forbids large trucks to even go up the road. That road is not a good cut-through road. There's no reason for large trucks to use that as a throughway. So you might, Foster Street has always had a sign on it that says no trucks above a certain size to use as a through, so they can't be used as a cut-through. You might want to ask the highway department, the selectmen, for such a thing.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
Young lady, you want to say something?
I'm Carol Gravel. I live at 46 King Street. I'm the house beside the music school.
Lovely house.
I would go along with Ann in terms of trash. Right there on King Street, I certainly get a lot more trash from everybody than just the store. But my concern is really traffic there and the way the trucks just rumble down King Street. I just can't even imagine what they would do. I'm sure they want to pick up their coffee before they get onto 495.
Since they opened that truck depot in Air, it's really become quite a heavily used road. A lot more trucks than we ever imagined.
I have also the same, I concur with the young lady here.
Gino, we all know who you are, but you have to identify yourself for the record,
My name
please.
is Gino Ferraroni, 2T and 2L. They call me Gino from Venice. We take you for a ride in Venice and then we'll throw you in the water. If you're not a swimmer, you make it. If you don't, you don't.
Are you the paddler?
Right.
And what's your address?
28 Howard Avenue, 26 and 28 Howard Avenue. There's the mess. Okay, well, I walk with my wife with the dogs and I noticed, well, I would say from a month ago, that they're trying to keep the water there, the little stream there and clean. I noticed a lot of plastic bottles and cups, and if you walk on your own, you can see the same thing I see. And unfortunately, nobody cleans it up. I mean, and if you have that, if they go by and buy coffee on the car or the truck is going to be parked on Kim Street, that street practically, like the young lady mentioned, should not be used for trucks unless there's an emergency, not for every day. Because if they go another 600-700 feet, there's a light, they can take a left, they can go wherever they want to go. You know what I mean? Kimball Street is a very small street. It's practically, even children walk there after school, you know what I mean? And I'm really concerned about the trash because if they have something like that in Littleton, which it's unusual. In Littleton, I've been here for 36 years, was never allowed for a company, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, to have a drive-through. So I think they should keep it that way. It's a small town, you know what I mean? Come to Westford.
So I just want to also read into the record the building inspector's comments, because we never got to those as part of this hearing. And he writes, 25 King Street, the applicant seeks a special permit and variance from 17326 for the construction and site work of a drive-through for the purpose of selling food to persons remaining in their vehicles. The complex at 25 King Street includes a convenience store, gas station, and coffee shop. The coffee shop offers prepared-for-takeout food and drink. The applicant argues in favor of a variance for a drive-through due to hardship owing to the lack of, quote, common element of modern convenience, end quote, and, quote, competitiveness in the common market, end quote. Although this may be true, the argument does not meet the threshold for hardship. The building is fully handicap accessible. Special permits for food sold directly to persons remaining in their vehicles may be granted in certain situations where Section 173-26, Note 4 is satisfied. The applicant argues in favor of a special permit for uses in districts which prohibit said use. The district in question is B, business, which permits restaurant and other food-serving establishments. The prohibition on drive-through use is accessory specific to food-serving establishments, as noted in 173-26-4. The coffee shop use is permitted, but the accessory drive-through is not, unless the takeout is clearly incidental to service for on-premise consumption. No further comment. Now, the applicant isn't here to present or to defend, so I don't want to get into arguments, but I wanted that on the record. I wanted it in the minutes. I wanted the applicant to hear the sentiment in the room. And now the board needs to discuss whether to allow the applicant to withdraw without prejudice the application for this.
I'd like to discuss the case a little bit.
I don't think we have the liberty to do that because the applicant didn't make the presentation.
The applicant chose not to be here, as we've given him 2 other extensions. We've had butters show up 2 other times. I'd like to discuss this a little bit, and I think we are within our legal rights to do so.
My problem is that the applicant has not presented, and we don't usually have board discussion till the applicant's made a presentation. He's made a written presentation. If everybody insists, we can read it into the record, but I would like to remind you that we're treading on not very solid ground to have a discussion about an applicant's request without hearing and sitting through the applicant's presentation.
Okay, so then let's frost it a way that everyone will like. Let's just discuss the merits of drive-through establishments in general in this particular zoning case. Particularly, that's what I want, particularly zoned area. Can we discuss the fact that town meeting that we have voted against such drive-throughs based on concerns of trash, and they have come up in town meeting, can we discuss that kind of thing?
I would be more comfortable if we voted on the applicant's request to withdraw, and then, as a matter of board policy, we can discuss among ourselves a general thinking about drive-throughs, because I have no objection to everyone, even the applicant, hearing what you have to say, but not in the context of his application.
Okay, what happens if we vote against him, allowing him to withdraw? What happens then?
I personally would recommend against doing that, just because this board has never done that to my knowledge, and any applicant has a right to withdraw their application. It hasn't been heard.
And if we were to not accept the withdrawal without prejudice, then we're kind of making a decision on the case, aren't we? And without
Yes,
the
then we have to
presentation,
vote on the case.
and without the
essence.
presentation, even though I have issues, it's not probably fair to the client
Right.
to
But they would have the right
do
to come
this.
back and present again, correct?
Yeah,
Not if we find.
If we vote against,
With prejudice.
if we vote against allowing the withdrawal, we have to vote on the case. Logically speaking, we would probably deny. If we deny, they have to go to court. I don't think we want to go there.
Okay. I'm
and the
just trying to
fact that we
understand
would
that.
deny without them presenting would
Might give him a
We
case.
give them a leg up on the case.
So,
Yeah.
so let's keep in mind in the future, when we extend and allow people to, so if we're allowing him to withdraw without prejudice now, that's not the same thing as the extension he asked for last month, right?
No, what I'd like to remind everyone is, everything is a process, and I am certain that the applicant made his application so that he would generate feedback and determine if it was likely to fly or not fly. I suspect that the reason he's been advised by counsel to withdraw is manyfold, including whether or not he's established hardship and whether or not the community at large has let him know that we're not interested right now in this application. I submit to you that he has other alternatives available, not the least of which is coming back with a better application, a better presentation, or even, frankly, he could wait for another board complexion and hope that the board changes. That's everybody's prerogative. So I don't think it's our policy or our job to say, no, you can't come back, no, we don't want this application. We have to have a hearing.
So what is the process if he wants to come back now? Let's say in 2 months he wants to come back. What's the process?
He has to file all over again, notice all over again, pay all over again,
Okay,
post
fine.
all over again.
That's
Okay.
fine, yep.
Anyone else?
Yes, we can do.
Okay. So would I like to entertain a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw without prejudice?
Seconded.
Did someone make the motion? I
I'll
didn't.
make a motion.
I was about to say so moved or read it, I just say so moved. Did you make the motion?
No, I seconded it, which
Okay.
is incorrect.
So I'll first it. and-
Okay.
Adam Wilden, got it.
You got it? Okay. Now that, I would like to move that, with the application being withdrawn, let's close that hearing.
We have to vote on it, right?
I don't think so. I think we just voted on the withdrawal of the application. We don't have to vote to close the hearing because
No, but
there's
we
no
have to
hearing.
vote on the
We-
We
withdrawal.
didn't vote on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor of allowing the withdrawal?
Aye.
Against? Okay. Now that that's closed and withdrawn, I am more than happy to poll the board, not a whole long dissertation, but out of curiosity, what the board's feelings are about, about drive-through. Not this application and not this presentation and not this hardship, just generally speaking, your feedback on drive-through.
Okay, to me, this footnote is clear. You can get a special permit for, carrying out food if it's not incidental to the business. In this case, it is, it's a Dunkin' Donuts. But the first part of that says, food may not be sold directly to persons remaining in their vehicles. I think the town bylaw does not allow it, period.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl?
Our purpose is to find cases where the zoning bylaws don't fit a particular case, or there is extreme circumstances that allows us to make exceptions to the zoning bylaws. There's nothing extreme circumstances here. They just want to increase their business and make it easier to sell more. And they're doing a fine business just like they are, or any business. And I think any business who wants to go develop this kind of thing that is not part of our zoning bylaws, it's not our business to grant it. They need to go to town meeting. The town has to make that decision, not us.
Okay. Mark, you walked in late, but just on drive-through in the,
I'm still trying to clarify in my mind the exception where, other than where the takeout is clearly incidental to service for on-premise consumption. That, to me, would call in a restaurant that has number of tables and you've got a drive-through. It seems that, no, you can't have a drive-through. I think you can make the argument here that they don't have on-premise consumption. You walk into a counter, pick up your thing, what's your order, go out to your car. To me, whether you drive up from your car and pick it up, or park, walk in, pick it up, it's going to create the same issues that people have brought up: traffic, noise, trash. So having a drive-up, to me, doesn't really change what's already going on there. And again, I probably want a better clarification before I would say, in this case, it is or is not allowed.
So
We already have tons of drive-ups in towns, they're called banks.
excuse me, Cheryl, I don't want to get back and
No,
forth
but
into
yeah,
it, just
okay.
because it's not in front of us. I just wanted everybody's thoughts on it, if you don't mind. I want to move on to the night.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I
then-
can talk later.
And John, go ahead.
So my concern here is that, the town has spoken and said they don't want it. And we need to be really careful when we go against what the town has said, because there are a bunch of other restaurants in town, and they're gonna all raise their hands and say, oh, he got one, I want one. And so we have to be careful that it really is a hardship, and it really, is important. And as, all I can see is that particular one, there was no hardship, they just wanted something that they couldn't get right now.
And Joe?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with what he just said. I basically had the same thought process on that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time.
Thanks,
I
Joe.
hope that we satisfied your
Throw
need
money
to
out the
be
window as they drive away.
heard on the issues. Okay.
Huh?
Okay, I'm
You
going to
know
move
where we
on.
stand.
On the bank.
I'm going to move on. It's exactly 7:40
But if it
PM.
comes back, come back again, please.
But if you walk in or drive in, you
Oh, yeah,
see
there's no
trash.
difference.
Thank you.
This is a hearing on case number 897A, the petitioner Joe Azzolino's, I'm sorry, 7, I'm ahead of myself. 7:30 PM. Hearing case number 896A, the petitioner Madavi and Gagarin Oliver request for a special permit or a variance pursuant to section 17310 for a proposed addition at 6 Grist Mill Road. Before we start, I need to make an announcement that I think I have had some past dealings with the Olivers. I have no financial interest in the outcome of this case. I did a search of my files, and I didn't find anything recent or current, and I'm not sure I even represented you on anything, but it has nothing to do with this matter. Okay? Also, I'm going to rotate in Mark and John as voting alternates on this one. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Oliver, you come forward and present your case as informally as you like. After you finish presenting, then the board can ask questions. We'll read the building inspector's comments. After that, we'll ask anyone who's in a butter or a neighbor of yours to comment, and then we'll make some deliberation and decisions. So go ahead.
So basically, there's a deck which is existing next to the kitchen, and we kind of want to convert that into a full use four season room. So I spoke with the building inspector, and we are within the number of rooms which the property can have, because we have a 5-bedroom septic. But the house itself has been built long ago, grandfathered into one corner of this 1-acre plot. And I think if we make this into a room, it's not 15 feet from the plot line. And that's what we are applying for.
Can I just do something procedural, and then I'll let my board ask you any questions they want? I went to the property, and I've read the building inspector's comments on this property, and I believe I agree with the building inspector that this appears to be a request for a variance. This property is conforming. It looks as though the existing house is conforming to setback and sidelines. Maybe that 14.8 there to the side of the house is a little shy, but I don't think that's a right number, and I'll explain later. But so anyway, the building inspector wants this treated as a variance, which means that the Olivers have to establish that there are conditions specific to the soil shape or topography of the property that create a hardship for you to have the ability to do what you need to do with this property in any other location. So I heard you say that the property is already built, it's at the corner of the lot. Now I'll open it up to the board to ask any further questions.
The deck is 8.8 feet, so that's non-conforming.
I don't think the deck's on the original plan though, right?
Well, it's on this plan. So,
I think the building inspector comments were that there was never a permit for that deck.
Weren't you
So
here
that it's
from
not-
us not long ago to put a kitchen on?
yeah.
That was like 4 years ago.
So why did you have to come before us to put a kitchen on if you're completely conforming? I'm trying to figure out, I'm
so
trying to
when-
remember what happened,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So basically, when we had a really small kitchen, and we wanted to add something in front of the kitchen to make it a dining room. And that's when we came for this variance where it was 30 feet, and we asked for an extra 5 feet to make it 25 feet from the road.
From the street.
Okay, and I thought we
So that's the
granted,
front of the house.
oh, we granted that.
Yes.
You just haven't done it
Thank you.
yet?
We finished that. We just want a smaller room on the other side of the kitchen.
The plans don't show anything in 30 feet of the property.
No,
I'm a little confused, so is
So
this,
where is
plan?
this?
So is this the old
Is it
property?
shown on this plan?
that's the old plan.
So right here, they're talking about, it's this room, this is the, it looks like the addition that-
There's
Yeah,
a
but it's still
plan from
130 away.
2013 that shows the kitchen. That's not what they can do.
Oh, I see. This is the addition that you,
Oh, different plan. Oh, that's what I said, this
Okay.
is a different plan.
so this is behind that. This is the deck that exists right now that wasn't original.
Yeah, this should
on the
really be a
original. So
plan.
at some point, someone added a deck.
Yeah.
Whether or not Roland has no history of a permit, I assume.
Yes,
No, this is, she just dug it out of the file.
Oh, yeah,
and this one has a sideline at 17.3, not 14.
Okay.
Here's the 25-foot.
But there's no dimension to the deck, so
No.
I don't know what that
There's
is compared
there's
to
also,
28.
this,
So the deck existed back when this was.
no, it wasn't.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it did.
What year is this?
5 years ago,
I'm also troubled by this. When I went to the house, it appeared from the street
6 years ago.
that you have a straight across front, and that if I looked down the left side of the house, it was pretty straight with a bump out near where the deck was. Neither of these are showing a picture of what I saw when I went to your house.
A bump out meaning, the window you mean?
That would be, if you go to
The deck is in straight line with the left of the house.
They converted the screen porch into a habitable room a couple of years ago.
That was in 2008.
Did they get permits
Is
for
it
that?
possible to call up Google Maps on the screen?
Yeah, I have it here, if you want.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought we talked about having that ability.
Michelle, Shelley, can you put Google Maps up on the screen?
Is that a smart
I
screen?
can't,
It's
my
hard, there's a lot of
computer's
trees
not
there, I don't
working
know
right
if
now,
you-
so I can't get
I
anything.
actually looked at it earlier
Yeah.
today.
Yeah,
It
we
was
can
pretty-
pass that down.
Did you
Yeah,
get this?
yeah.
This
Yeah, it
is
is
not what I
unfortunate that it's way on the left side of the property. But my thinking is this needs to be the plan.
We don't
Should be
have-
something showing the additions, proposed addition, not this one in the package.
So, there's 4 different plot plans for that property that sort of show the chronology of it. And
So where is this in the grand scheme of thing? What number is this?
that was 2012 when they added the kitchen to the front.
Have they added anything since?
Well, the deck was added sometime between 94 and 2008, but we don't have a permit for it.
Okay, that happens,
So
unfortunately.
if you look through the plot plans, there's one from 89 and one from 94 that don't show a deck, and then that one does show a deck. But
Can I
at,
ask? Yes, go ahead.
at some point, there was a screen porch way back in like the early 80s, and then they converted that screen porch to a room, which is if you're looking at that left side, what that bump out is.
Was there a
that you're
permit
talking
pulled for
about,
that?
Sherry.
Yeah, was there a permit pulled for that?
Yes.
And does that still sit more than 15 feet from the property line?
Doesn't look like it.
That's it right there.
No, you're not seeing the bump out.
According to this plan.
That doesn't.
It does.
No, the bump out that I saw was about, not much more than this, just right here.
No, I'm talking about this. That's 17 feet down. This angle up here, it's going to be less,
Right.
considerably less.
Here's my problem, if I could be forward, I'd try to sit back until everybody's spoken, but can I just ask if any of you have been to the site? Did you go to-
Drove by it, yeah.
Okay. This is what troubled me when I was at the site, and I just need to ask if anyone else recognized it or has a problem with it. This dwelling is very, very big. How much square footage do you have inside? It almost looks like there's another whole in-law apartment or something on it. Is there an in-law?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the dwelling is very big, and you're entitled to have a very big dwelling on a 40,000 square foot lot. But hardship involves sort of, you can't do this anywhere else. My problem is, while I appreciate that you're going to use it as a meditation room, and that's what you've described to us, once we get you that close to the property line and that encroaching onto a neighbor, what if the next owner wants to use it for a heavy metal band practice room? That's what I worry about. And I don't know, we can't condition how you use your property. Is there anywhere else on your house that you don't have to violate the setback with all of that space and all of that?
Well, back of the property is all wetlands, right? So it's
Yeah.
conservation,
Yeah.
one cannot build
Can't go
beyond the
behind your
septic.
house?
So behind the in-laws suite, there's a septic
Yeah.
system. And behind the house, there's the pool. And
Can you-
beyond that is the,
Can you, so, come here a second.
Oh, there's one there, yes, he's showing the pool.
Yeah, I think we need to see a
Can
better
you do
plan.
something like in here, this area?
that's where
Perhaps?
the pool equipment is.
Well, you got a bit of a distance between the house and the pool.
The pool's
So this is-
motor and all that. is-
What's the proposed size
That could be moved.
14
of the meditation room? How much?
14 by 24.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. I'm going to ask you to do this before I even, I really don't want to even go further on this. We have 3 or 4 competing sets of plans. We don't know what's on the site. We don't know where the hardship is. We don't know where the structures are. I think we really need to see a more accurate plan and more accurate measurements, because, as I said, I'm troubled by the proximity to the neighbor, who's not
It's a
distant.
stone
Their
wall
house
that
is
is
kind of
septic
squashed to the
controlled.
right.
Assume the neighbor's not here.
No, I understand that.
So that's the,
It should be.
So this is your garage.
this is the garage.
That's the garage, that's
That's
the
the
in-law.
in-laws.
That's your
That's
house.
already the house.
Yep, that's the
That's
little
a
addition to your kitchen.
It was a 3-season porch.
You see, the problem is you're getting
We
off.
only moved front with that.
I
That
know.
addition, we only moved a little bit
I
front.
know, and I was here when we gave it to
Yeah.
you. And I'd like to give you what you'd like, but I've got to tell you, it's so close to the property line, and You got quite a bit of area back
Sure,
there
it also
before you
is the
hit the
covenant.
pool. It just,
Oh, yeah, that's the one. Okay,
you
there's
know, the problem is, when you do
I have it
a
highlighted in
14 by 24 room, you're just using it as a meditation room, but someone else is going to use it as a bedroom, whoever you sell it to, or a band practice room, or something else, and you're only 8 feet away from the property line. That's a problem.
That's a big room.
Can you move it somewhere else? Can you,
I mean, they could,
can,
Yeah, if they
you'd
made
probably
it
be much better off exploring that,
10
and then
by
come back with an
24.
architect's plans.
Yeah.
Because we always want to give people
Well, I
what
can
they
see them
want.
wanting to
But we have to be
platform,
reasonable
yeah,
with neighborhoods
cost
too, and
savings,
property
but
lines.
that's
And
not
8
our
feet's
job to
awfully
save people
close.
money.
Okay.
And you got a close
When
neighborhood
I
there.
need you on the record, I can't do side conversations, we've got to be on the record, not one-on-one, please. Shelley reminded me too, and Cheryl, I forgot this came before us before, maybe that's how I recognize their names. But this property also has restrictive covenants that the developer imposed when he created the subdivision, that also speaks to setbacks and sidelines. Now, it's not our job to enforce restrictive covenants, but the neighbors all have a right to enforce the restrictive covenants, as does the developer, I believe. I'm not going to make a legal determination today. So even if this board were to grant you a variance from the zoning regulations, you still would have to satisfy the protective covenant regulations, which may not have expired. And I had forgotten that. We looked at that the last time this came before. At this point in time, I would like to read the building inspector's comments into the record, and then ask if there are any
Want me to read
abutters
it
to the
this way?
petition, please.
8 Grist Mill Road, the applicant seeks a special permit to increase a nonconformity pursuant to 173-10B sub 1. Specifically, the applicant wishes to extend upward and enclose an existing open deck of unknown origin. The mortgage survey plan dated June 4th, 1994 shows no open deck attached. Based on this information, it's recommended that the request for variance to be as an open deck has no record of being, that the request to be a variance as the open deck has no record of being permitted. So basically, he says he doesn't recognize there even being a deck there. It doesn't mean you can't look elsewhere on your
Yeah.
property for the additional space you need for your beliefs or concerns or whatever.
Just for the board's observation, this is the 1994 mortgage survey plan referenced in the building inspector's letter. This is a
It's grown over the years.
permit for a screen porch in 1977, and it shows the leaching bed where they're saying the pool now is. Did the septic system change location? Yeah, okay. And then,
Why was your house built so far to the left of the lot?
You don't know?
We wish it weren't, then we would have these.
Is
It's
all
a-
this
it's a beautiful
wetlands
home.
back here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you run into a lot of wetlands in the back, you
No,
said.
it's like 100 feet away, more than 150 feet from that wetland, which is, there's a little creek at the back, but I don't know, I think they wanted to maybe build 2 plots there, I don't know.
Maybe.
Oh,
Seems like,
did they think?
because the house numbers are like 6 and 10, so.
Yeah.
So maybe they had visions of subdividing.
Yeah.
That may have been
so-
another
and-
lot.
is there anyone here who wants to speak to this application? Any butters present? No. Okay,
So we're kind of stuck because of that.
what's the board's pleasure? Do you think we want to continue this to have them come in with better plans so we can see? It's
Yeah, on
not
the
to say
plan-
that we can't grant it, it's just we
Yeah.
don't have enough information to find, I don't think we have enough information to conclude whether there's a hardship or not.
And I think the plan should show the pool and the septic system so we can determine where you can or can't. You know, and
So
that
you want a
better is
better
that.
And
surveyed,
keep in
officially
mind,
surveyed.
8 feet is very close to a property line. That for a permanent structure, that could be a bedroom or a practice room or something to be, for us to allow that to be 8 feet away from the closed property line, where there's, especially when there's another neighbor close also,
Yeah.
would be very unusual for us to allow that if there's any other way to put a addition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
How close would your proposed addition put you to the property? 8 feet?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
okay.
it's
So keep that in
That's
mind.
only- yeah,
I'm not
that's the-
saying that I'm only one member of the board, and I'm not saying that the board would refuse it. I'm just saying it would be unusual for us to grant that when there's other places that such a addition could be put.
I just also want to comment that I usually want to give everybody everything, but I draw the line at 10 foot on sideline setbacks, only because we have a bylaw that says if you have a detached garage, it can be 10 feet. And so in my mind, there's something that gives me guidance that 10 feet is okay for some things. But I'm very reluctant to go to 8 feet personally, unless there's a really good reason.
I don't even like 10 feet.
You don't even like 10 feet, yeah.
But you know what, and sometimes, but we've granted closer than that for real hardships. We've gone down to just, we're making sure people can walk around things.
Yeah.
But that's, you really have to be between a rock and a hard place for us to give that.
Anyone else
So
want to
would,
give them some guidance?
Yeah, I would tend to agree that what I'm seeing from the plan view, or, from Google Earth, and what's shown here, there's a lot of disconnects. As far as where the existing deck is, what's the setback to the existing deck, even that wasn't permitted. So, I think better plans that showed the other things that we've talked about, as well as, seriously looking at, okay, where else can we put that wouldn't get so close, that would be within the setback, especially when you do have a neighbor there, even though they didn't show up, that's, right there.
Yeah.
Usually, again, in other times, we've allowed shorter, smaller setbacks, but there's nobody there. But in this case,
Or
yeah.
there's nowhere else.
Or there's nowhere else, yeah. So I think those two things, a better set
Even
of
then, we've
plans
limited
showing
people.
everything as is, as well as exploring other options.
And even then, we've limited people to a one-car garage versus a two-car garage to keep them a little further away from
yeah.
property lines.
Okay.
We try to protect
So-
people, not
Sure.
just you.
So if we come up with a plan for the extension, which has got 10 feet, will that be something to consider, or?
Well, you heard the
That is
board.
not-
I'm willing to look at it. That doesn't mean I will say yes to it. It depends on the hardship. And Cheryl said she's less willing than I am
I
to look at
think you
10
need to
feet.
show you have a hardship because you can't put it behind the house. There's looks like there's plenty of room between it and the swimming pool. And in-law apartment area, back in that area, looks like there's plenty of space for this room. You'd have to show us a hardship why it can't go back there. And so, you mentioned septic system, but there's nothing on the plan that shows where it is. We can see the pool on the overhead view, but,
Yeah.
dimensions showing how far away.
Stuff like
It
that.
looks, just quick glance at it, that there's other places where it could fit. And then that would meet the requirement of not being too close to the property line.
John, I just also want to say that one thing's about hardship in the sense that you absolutely need this. A 14 by 24 room addition to an already large 5-bedroom home with an in-law suite it seems to me that there's no need to have this. If I was talking about a small house with a big family and nobody had their own space, or we needed an extra bedroom or an in-law, then I think I could see my way clear to it. But this is a want, not a need, and hardship really has to be based on a need, not a want, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
June,
Nothing said.
anyone else?
I hate sending you away.
I do too.
Okay.
Can we have a motion to continue this to the next hearing, and you'll bring us back some
I so move.
detail? So let's pick a time certain and the date, please.
Or if you find a space
July
that you don't need a special permit or variance,
Yeah,
then you don't have to come
come
back.
back, okay. Makes sense. What about a 3-season porch there? Is that also a variance?
Well, there's a problem,
Yes,
there's a
that would also
problem,
be-
is he doesn't even have a permit for
Yeah.
that.
It's a structure, so it's the same setback requirement.
Yeah.
July 19th, 7:20.
7:20. Okay, so a motion is to continue this hearing till July 19th, 2018 at 7:20 PM. And I need a second to that motion. Moved by John.
I'll second it.
Mark, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Google picture back.
That's okay.
Google.
We'll see you next
My
month.
5 years.
We'll try.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Can I have the plot plan back for the file too, please?
Probably make them at least take up 1 foot to show.
And there was one folded I sent that way. Does somebody have a plot plan folded in half, or does that come out? Thank you, okay. Okay, the next hearing is
Sitting on a cement block.
7:40 PM, hearing of case number 897A. The petitioner, Joe Azzolino, requests an appeal of the building inspector's decision pursuant to the permitted use of the dwelling at 169 King Street. First of all, I also need to announce that in the past, I have represented the Azzolino and Cummings families, but don't think I've had anything with them for 7 or 8 years now. If anyone wishes me to stand down, I will. And I'll need
You
to,
represented Mr. Azzolino, you're saying?
no, his father, Mr. Cummins, the owner of the property, but not for about 8 years now. So I don't have any necessary reason to stand down. I have no financial interest in the outcome of this matter. And I need to ask if, Mark, you just sat, so let's make it John and Jillian. Okay? Voting alternates. So come forward and present, and then we will have the board ask you questions. Go ahead.
So the decision of the building inspector is that this is a single-family home, not a multifamily dwelling. It was purchased in 1978 as a burnt-out house and then was converted back then in 1978. I've also dropped off affidavits stating that back in 1978 through 83, that those people lived there in the apartments, I being included as one of them, and then 2 other people. And it was proven back in 1980 and 1983, it was multifamily dwellings. Since 1994, it's been taxed as a multifamily dwelling, and I'm trying to ask the board to consider it as a non-conforming use.
And just procedurally, please, you're here on an appeal from the building inspector's
Yes.
determination and not for a variance or a special permit, is that
That's
right?
what I was told to do, yes, by the board, by the building inspector,
Okay.
to appeal the decision.
Do you
Okay,
want me to read in the building?
not yet. Let's first hear, he's made the presentation. Any board member comments or questions?
Yeah, I hear the term multifamily, but the bylaw allows a 2-family if the house was built before 54 or whatever it was.
As of right, yeah.
So, so if that was built before then and was converted after you set a fire into a 2-family, that's fine, but not a 3-family.
What needs to be distinguished is that zoning was enacted in Littleton in, what year? 50s? All right, then, I have some other comments, but let the board continue to ask questions and make comments.
So anyway, multifamily, how many are you referring to?
There are 3 units,
3 1-bedroom units?
3 one-bedroom units, yes.
I'd kind of like to hear the building.
Was there a
commissioners.
building permit when the?
I don't want to go down this road without that.
We cannot find building permits that converted it back in 1978.
Do you have a record of it?
No.
Were 3 families allowed in 78?
No.
There's 2-family conversions.
So my question was it renovated with a building, without a building permit?
There's no building permits for it.
When was the house built, do you know?
1900?
Okay, so that covers that one.
Ron, do you want to speak to it?
Well, I have my comments that I did before. The only additional comment I would make that is that in 1978, there was a building code. Building code was enacted in Massachusetts, a uniform code in 1972. Prior to that, there were building codes in Littleton. Nothing that I can see in our codes or our previous so-called zoning bylaws prior to the 48 enactment allowed a 3-family in Littleton. We at one point, and I was discussing this with the chair, Littleton, and I'm going to guess at the dates, in the 70s, the town approved at town meeting multiple family dwellings but they failed to identify districts in which you could build these. And as a result, the following year, they abolished that particular part of the bylaw. With that said, I can give you examples on Jennifer Street where there are multiple family dwellings. I don't know how they got there either. All I can tell you is, and my records show that there were no permits in 1978 to refurbish a building at 169 King Street, and there should have been. And if at that point there was a conversion of the building, there should have been fire separation, and there should have been the criteria for the safety of the occupants that should have been followed. I'll mention once again, Jennifer Street, those buildings that are multiple family dwellings were new buildings, and I presume they were under the proposed bylaw that was approved at town meeting. They again don't have fire separation either. So, I wasn't born back then, so I don't know.
So do you believe? If I could speak to that just for 1 second, it was in the years between 77 and 79, and Roland and I frequently look at this period of time, because what happened was, town meeting did vote for 2 separate districts in town. They were going to have smaller lots than 1 acre, and they were going to have multifamily dwellings. And though town meeting voted it, they never voted the map to it. And town council and I have discussed it, and I've used it in a couple of instances where we can kind of snag that 77 to 79 period on things that happen, and look to it and say, it was legitimately done because there was no map established. So it's not like there would have been a zone that it was allowed and a zone that it wasn't allowed. And my question too was going to be, the Jennifer Street ones are not built to code with fire separation either, right?
No, but they are a newer building. My assumption is that the codes weren't being applied. I can reference many buildings in town that haven't followed code.
So you believe this to be a 2-family?
I believe this is a one-family. As far as my black and white vision of this building, there are no permits, so therefore I don't see a multiple-family dwelling. I see a single-family dwelling. If I could reference back in 1978 that there was a fire and there was a building permit issued and the building inspector blessed what we have here today, I'd have no problem.
Do you know any history of this particular building?
No.
I do. Can we, I just want to see if there's any abutters to speak to this application also. Hold your thought, because I want you to give us a summary, but I want to hear your abutters. Yes, go ahead.
In what respect? As, you know, I can always remember it, even when I was young, as a, three family there.
Multifamily.
It's been that way for 40 years.
For years.
What about your son? You're not living in it now, are you?
Not me.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Want to identify
Living
yourself for the
across the
record? I'm
street.
sorry. I need you to identify yourself and your
Ronald
address.
Raffy,
Yeah.
170 King Street, Littleton.
And I assume from what you said, you have no objection to the 3-family?
Absolutely not.
You believe
No.
it has been that way?
That's what- it's
How long have you
always
lived
been
there?
there.
How long have you lived there? At
In
King Street?
King Street, since 1985.
Yeah, and I've been here since 79 and always remember that to be a multifamily. Tell me what you remember as the history, Carol.
Well, I've been here since 1958. I grew up at 170 King Street. 169 King Street was across the street. In the 70s, there was a house fire that burnt the house and gutted it. And it sat vacant for a number of years. For many years, my dad, Jim Cummins, said he wanted to purchase the property, always with the intent that it would be a multifamily home. And he did that in late 78, and it's been a multifamily home ever since then. I lived there. We have affidavits of the lady that lived upstairs in the second floor. So for over 40 years, it has been a multifamily home.
And then you said recently the assessor changed it to
In
what?
1994, they began taxing it as a multifamily.
Before that, they hadn't been taxing it as a multifamily.
Not to my knowledge, and not to the town's records.
And it's been taxed as a multifamily?
Since 1994.
Since 94.
Yes.
Then I saw something about a septic permit, Roland.
Yes, there is a new septic permit for the property that will be installed.
Oh, that permit says 3 one-bedroom dwellings.
Yes.
But Roland's letter referenced an older septic permit. What did you say on that?
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
There wasn't ever
Sure, why
an
don't you
older
read
septic
Rollins
permit.
into the record? Let's read
Sure,
yours
I
in while you're
just-
looking.
This is the house we're talking about.
Yeah, I call
This
it,
is the one that had the greenhouse on it.
No, that's in the house next
no,
door.
it's
The one with the red
That's
barn
next
behind
door.
it.
I call
That's
it,
correct.
I call it the one that sits in the armpit of the on-ramps of 495.
Yeah, we know it well.
It really is low in the
We know it well.
sinkhole there, in the curve
Yeah,
of the.
right on the on-ramp.
And if this board remembers, we had quite a brouhaha when there was an application to put a doggy daycare center in there. And this board actually granted the doggy daycare center, and then the planning board defeated our vote and gave Mr. Cummins a lot of trouble about selling the property, and the doggy daycare a lot of trouble about entering, and went to town meeting on whether or not to rescind our ability to give use variances. So this property has quite a history, and the Cummins have been through a lot to legitimate its use. And by the way, it had a barn that was used for a number
You're
of years.
advocating.
I'm sorry. The
You're
barn,
not commenting anymore.
the barn was, is the barn gone?
No,
No,
it's still
I
used
was
the way it is, as always been
All
for
right.
the last 35 years. It's the same
169
use.
169 King Street, the applicant seeks an appeal to the building commissioner's ruling pursuant to 173-6B subsection C, A, and C, 3C and A and C. Specifically, the applicant has requested verification that the structure is a legal three-family building with dwelling, which was denied based on lack of evidence in the building file. A review of the assessor's records indicates the structure was a single-family dwelling up to around 1995. Three-family dwellings were not allowed in Littleton except under comprehensive permit. Regardless of this fact, in 1995, there was a single-family dwelling suggesting the building evolved without benefit of a building permit. Board of Health records show that in 1978, the then owner wanted to convert the single-family dwelling into 2 apartments. The issue was left unresolved. It is the opinion of this department the conversion of 169 King Street into a 3-family dwelling was done without Town of Littleton approval and exists in violation of the Littleton zoning bylaws and the Massachusetts State Building Code. No further comment. And there's an email in there from the assessors. I'm very willing to believe that it is a 3-family. I ran into this up on Foster Street, where at one point that was a boarding house, and it was a 6-family and a 3-family, and I could find all kinds of people to give it all kinds of history and belief. Right down the street from you, we had a case come before us of a house that had been converted to a 2-family, and the permits weren't. It was granted as a 2-family, but the permits weren't done. There were no fire separations, and we were quite willing to give him the fact it was a 2-family as long as he brought it up to code. He had to put in fire separation walls. I have no problem with that in a 3-family here. As long as it's a safe dwelling, and we'll have to vote all this, but this is my comment. As long as it's a safe dwelling for you to rent out, and people, if you bring it up to the fire separation walls, what else is there, Roland, besides that? It's really a safety hazard. Right number of egresses in the fire separation walls, that all works
Recently
for
had a
me.
fire inspection, is that
Yeah.
not true?
Yep.
Do they have fire separation walls and the right number of egresses?
I don't believe so. How many egresses do you have?
Have you been in the property?
No, I have not.
Then how can you say
Every
that?
apartment has 2
How can you say that? You
egresses.
haven't been in this property.
Okay, Joe, through the board, through the chair, please.
So could perhaps, through the board chair, perhaps we could do what we did right down the street from you, which is your neighbor like 3 doors down, that little gray house that's a 2-family?
The problem is, and I'm not opposed to where you're trying to go with this. The problem is, pending before you is a procedural issue of whether the building inspector's determination that it's not a 3-family was accurate or not accurate. They're appealing the building inspector. So this board needs to come to terms as a board with whether or not there's enough evidence in the file to determine that it was
Can we do what we, can we?
pre-existing or
But can we
grandfathered.
do what we did with the gentleman 3 doors down, where we determined it was a 2-family, but told him he had to bring it up to 2-family codes, and that's what we did down the street. Can we do that here?
I don't know that we can force that issue. I don't think
We
we
did
can.
on him.
Yeah, but I don't think we can say we agree with the building inspector or don't agree with the building inspector we don't agree with the building inspector, but we don't agree as long as you bring it up to code. I don't think we can do that. In the other one, it was a special permit, and you can condition special permits. That's the difference.
So they're not here for a special permit.
No, they're here to appeal the building inspector's determination that it's not a three-family.
A few months back, we had somebody in front of us wanting to make a three-family home out of an existing building that according to records was basically just a one-family, even though the at point in time, multiple people lived in the house at a time.
It was used as a boarding house.
It was used as a boarding house, but it doesn't make it right. And we told them the same thing, you can't have a three-family, it doesn't exist, the zoning code does not allow it. So it's not like we usually give a variance for something, we're giving a variance to allow them to do something that's allowed in the zoning code, but because they're too close to a property line, or there's some other hardship, this is just,
You're missing the procedural issues, John. The procedural issue here is this property pre-existing as a three-family de facto? The three families have been living there since 1978, and the building inspector's determination that it's a one-family, is that
It
right or
says-
wrong? That's
Board-
all we can do today.
It says
We
the
can't
Board of
say it's-
Board of Health records show that in 1978, the owner wanted to convert a single family to 2 apartments.
didn't say it did.
It said the issue was left unresolved.
Unresolved, and there's no building permit showing that any work was approved.
There's a lot of no
Obviously, there's a lot of
building,
work done, but
there's a lot of no building permits on a lot of properties in Littleton that go back that far. If it's a pre-existing or if it's an existing, on a lot, isn't there a 7-year statute too, Roland, for premises built with a building permit but a mistake on it?
I mean, a statute of limitations.
There's a statute of limitations on
Chapter
saying.
48, but my opinion on that, and it's a split decision if you talk to whoever you talk to, is that if it's done without permits, you're not eligible for the statute of limitations. If you have a building permit established, and it was a mistake, let's say, on the building commissioner's part, after 7 years, I can't touch it.
But there's case law that says without a building permit, it's 10 years, and I know there's a
Right.
split of opinion,
Yep.
but that same statute is applicable and could be argued that after 10 years, there's it's a grandfather, and it can't be touched, it can't be questioned, because if it's existed for 10.
What's being asked of me is to verify that this is a three-family. I have nothing in my records, nor does the town have anything in their records, except 1995, when they picked up a three-family dwelling. That's all I have. And I was here in 1995, and I have no building permits for a conversion.
What do you mean, in 1995, they picked up a 3-family? You're saying
Let
assessment?
me read.
It's just the assessment.
Let me read the assessors. The assessors wrote something to the board, too. Let's read that into the record.
Shelley, please see below, our records have 1969 King Street as being a 101, single-family from the time of construction up to 1995. In 1995, our records indicate it was changed to a 105, three-family. It was a three-family from 1995 to 1999. The year 2000 to current, we have classified the property as 013, mixed use. I believe the assessors at this time changed the land use code to mixed use because of the barn in back. The barn has numerous small rooms being rented out as studios for various uses. I hope this helps. Just makes it more confusing.
Yeah. And then there's affidavits that, in fairness, need to be read into the record, too, so everyone can hear them. The first one is from Joseph Azzolino, and they're signed under the pains and penalties of perjury, but basically he says, I was a resident at 169 King Street between 79 and 83. During that time, it was used as a three-family dwelling and was occupied by 3 separate tenants. At no time during this period was it used as anything other than a three-family residential dwelling. To the best of my knowledge and belief, it's been used continuously as a three-family dwelling to the present. The next one is from Anita Hall. After first being duly sworn, I was a resident at 169 King Street in Littleton, Mass. Between 79 and 83. During that time, 169 King Street was used as a three-family dwelling and was occupied by 3 separate tenants. At no time during this period was 169 King used as anything other than a three-family residential dwelling. To the best of my knowledge and belief, it has been used continuously as a three-family dwelling to the present. Affidavit by Carol Cummins Azzolino, basically saying the same thing, resident since 79 to 83.
This is Carolyn Francis, yes.
Yes, and that's the wife of Joe. During that time, it was used as a three-family dwelling and was occupied by 3 separate tenants. and at no time was it used as anything other than, and I believe it was used that way to the present. And Joe Azzolino, I guess that's a duplicate. Oh, just with actual knowledge, not as a tenant. He's saying the same thing. Now, the only other thing I want to ask you it's often the policy of this board to try to negotiate some resolution so that nobody goes home without a Cupid doll. So Cheryl's statements are legitimate and valid, and I'd like you to address what objection or what hardship or what might it entail. You say there's already 2 egresses. What would it entail to put in fire separation between the units?
I do not know.
I have no idea.
No,
Can
we're
I-
not construction people.
Your
I can't help
location,
you.
can I, man?
Yes.
Your location is such that I, for one, and I don't speak for the board, but don't see it being a hardship for anyone in the neighborhood for you to be a 3-family. But my concern, and I shouldn't say that because you don't fit the zoning bylaws, especially if it's converted in 1995. The fact that people lived there before 1995, I've more than one house, and you've seen it too. We've gone to show if someone's put an apartment in the basement, it doesn't mean that it's a 2-family. So personally, I have no problem with you being a 3-family as long as everyone's comfortable with safety issues and fire codes, because frequently that basement apartment that's been put in illegally is a fire trap and a problem. And if Roland can go in and inspect and agree with you that it's up to code, and I'm
There are
willing
2
to find you
egresses for each
grandfathered
apartment.
personally.
Can you tell me where the apartments are located?
Yep, there's one in the top floor, second
Well, how many
floor.
floors are in the
There's
building?
3. There's a basement apartment, there's a first floor, there's a second floor.
Is the
The walkout
basement,
is the
Each-
basement,
is the
right?
basement at grade, is it walkout?
It's both walkouts, two egresses.
Yep.
One in the back, one in the front.
Yep.
So you upstairs, the first floor apartment, there's a King Street entrance, and there's a backyard entrance off the porch coming in from the driveway. And the second floor, there's a second floor going up, there's an egress there going in, and then there's an egress going downstairs through King Street. So each of
can
them
I
have
ask,
separate
can
two
I ask
egresses.
Roland if fire separation is only going to
Can
be
I ask-
necessary between floors?
Can I ask for a continuance to have Roland go in and inspect it?
What's going to happen is if this is what the board, I don't care, personally. If the board wants to grant them this 3-family, I don't care what restrictions you put on it. If there's going to be fire separation placed between the units, it's up to them to hire somebody to go in and determine where these fire separations are going to be. I'm not designing anything. That puts the town in an awkward position where there's liability.
I don't want you to design it, I'm just asking as a matter of information. If these are 3 discrete floors, is it reasonable to say the fire separation just needs to be between floors, or are there stairways that we have to worry about coming? Stairways too.
I guess I'd have to look at it.
There are no common
Stairway to the first
stairways
floor needs to be
in the building. They're not common. They're all separated. The 2 floors are separated, one on this side, one on this side.
Joe, you're giving me indigestion.
Are we getting away from this? Because I don't think we're here to decide if it's okay for them to be a 3-family. The way I understand it is, de facto, they've been a 3-family. Legally, they have not been. And the building inspector is saying legally they're not. If we were to side with the building inspector, would that mean they have to come back and seek a special permit to allow it to be a 2 or 3-family
Also, the
unit?
building inspector's saying it can't be, by zoning bylaws, it cannot be a 3-family.
I'm talking about letting them come back and apply, and we can have the same discussion we did with the person that had wanted 4 units. If we don't side with the building inspector, then we're basically saying that an illegal situation is okay. And we're kind of, in that case, they'll use that term again, de
Well, what do you-
facto approving that as a 3-family. So I don't know, what exactly can we do here, and what are the ramifications either way?
Roland had his
The
comment
building
first.
code requires that I inspect multiple family dwellings every year. Last year, Shelley did research with the assessors and came up with a list of multiple family dwellings that we have begun to inspect. 3 families, 4 families, hotels, whatever it might be. This particular address was notified last year, saying we want to come in and we want to look at the building to make sure it's safe for a 3-family, not even recognizing that this case was going to come before the board. I mean, it would have been automatic.
I've never seen that. We've never seen that notification.
Letters went out last year to all the multifamily.
Depends on where it went, though. I mean, my parents have not lived in their home for 2 years.
Who owns it?
My parents
Guns
owned
okay,
it.
you know who
It's
owns it.
family
Your pa-
trust.
All right, your parents got the letter.
We're
I'm
saying they
saying-
did.
Okay, Joe, through the
We're
chair.
saying, we're
Joe,
saying we
Carol,
didn't
through
receive
the
it.
chair.
We didn't
You
receive
had
a
your-
letter.
A letter
Because we
went
get
out
their
to
mail.
the address
We-
of
we-
record.
We get their
We
mail.
let Roland finish.
We get their mail.
Yep, the
All
letter
I'm
went out to
saying
the
is
address
that
of
we
record.
have conducted a few, we haven't got them all done, multiple family dwellings. Those that haven't responded, we haven't pursued them yet, but we intend to do so. It's just a matter of staffing and time.
Did you identify this as a multifamily dwelling because, why?
The
If it was a
assessors-
single,
We asked the assessors for a list of all multiple family dwellings, and that was on the list.
Carol, you had your comment to make.
I did. I'm confused as to why this is even a question, because there's multifamily dwellings all over town. We've already established that between 78 and 1980, there's missing building permits galore, and that the other multifamily homes that we're aware of don't have building permits and do not comply with code. So why are we being singled out, and why has this property been a problem for this town and this board and other boards for the last 10 years that we've tried to sell it and do the right things? And every time we try to do something, we hit a brick wall and we're not allowed to do anything, yet we invite people, we've let people come into the barn, we've invited them to inspect any time. You are welcome to come to 169 and look at all 3 apartments. We have no problem with that.
Okay,
In the
hang on.
last 2 years, my mom and dad have taken ill, and they've moved out of their home. The mail has been all mixed up for whatever reason. We get some, we don't get some. Everything is supposed to be forwarded to me. I have never received a request to view that property, and I'm happy to let you in if you would like to come.
And Mr. Bernie?
Just to answer the question, I'm being asked to verify that this is a three-family. Based on the information I have in town, I cannot do that. I will not sign it off. That's why it's before the board. I won't do it. I have no documentation to verify that this is a three-family. I can't manufacture it, and I'm not going to.
In our letter states that we
Can I-
understand that.
Can
We
I,
understand there's
can
no
I ask
documentation.
you, is this property under agreement? Is this,
Yes.
is that
Yes.
how this came up?
Yes.
Yes. The bank, the lender has asked the town for an opinion of compliance on zoning, and they rejected the sale because of his opinion.
There's,
In
There's a
the
practical-
the purchase is to leave the property just the way it is, just to let you know. There's no changes to the property.
So the only way around that would be if we were to grant a special permit at some point.
first of all, that's not what they're here for.
No, I
They're
know
here for us
that's
to
why I said at
decide
some point.
if the building inspector's determination was correct or not correct. And we have in the past done things like saying the building inspector's determination is correct, there's nothing in the file, but we find that this is historic or whatever. I mean, that's doable. Whether this board wants to do it or not is your prerogative. They're not here asking us to grant them a variance for a three-family.
No,
They're
I
asking
said
us to
before, if
overrule
we side with
Roland.
the building inspector, then their route would be to
They would
come
have to
for a
then
special
go
permit.
through the.
Excuse me, I thought we were asking for, to appeal the decision and ask for a decision on non-compliance use, non-conforming use.
Let's look at the application, I don't think that's what
The
it
letter,
said.
the letter that I wrote was asking for that, with the application. I'm asking if the current ownership is contending that this home should be considered pre-existing non-conforming use. Toward that end, I'd like to reconsider the position of the zoning opinion based on the pre-existing non-conforming use.
And so to get to that result, as I see it, the only way to get to that result is this had to be a three-family before the 50s, or if this board determines that that period between 77 and 79, where the zoning maps were mixed up, we could get, we might be able to get, the board might be able to vote in that regard. And
What year did it burn?
What year did it burn, do you know?
I'm not sure. I know it was in the late 70s, I believe.
Prior to 78 when he bought it.
Right, it was prior to
Was it-
70s.
did you tell me it was
Just
85?
before
No.
78.
Just before
I think
78?
it was
What year did it-
77, Could have been late 76 or 77.
Well, Jim bought it in 78, according to the purchase deed that's in your packet.
Okay, but on the other hand, we have record of him trying to convert it to a two-family in 95?
No, that's not correct.
That's not
That's
relevant,
not
because
correct.
we don't know if he was trying to convert from a 3 to a 2.
Nothing happened in
or a
95,
1
except
to
we
a
got
2,
taxed
so
as a
it's not- No,
multifamily.
it's not relevant.
The only thing that
Yeah,
changed in
there's
94,
something in
95
that
is the
here.
tax rate. That's all. It went from a single-family rate to a multifamily rate in 1994. That's
Just
the
the
only thing
tax.
that changed then.
And the assessors,
There was no application through the town. through the
Okay,
town
but
for
there
any-
was one in 78 to convert to two-family.
The septic, I thought it was. To build a
Board of
two-
Health records show that in 78, the owner wanted to convert to the single-family dwelling to 2 apartments.
That's when he purchased it.
That's when it was done, I guess, yeah, when he purchased it.
I make a motion that we close the hearing.
I'm not willing to close it yet, I still have a lot of questions. Not the least of which is, does this board think that we should refer to town council?
I think
on
we need
whether
to
or
have a
not-
discussion among ourselves.
Well, we can have that with the hearing open, and then we can ask for more information, so feel free to go ahead and discuss among yourselves. And I'm going to close it.
That might not be a bad idea, because if it's been in this condition for some period of time, there might be some precedent or something that, that allows them to continue. But we probably need a decision from the town council for that.
Where the records are so up in the air, where we have a neighbor who says that they remember it being a 3-family, but that doesn't mean it was a legal 3-family, or was built safely, or built to code, or built in such a way that if a fire broke out, it wouldn't automatically take out the 3rd floor. It just doesn't, I see illegal apartments being built all the time, and they sometimes have been there a very long time. And it just, I have a heartburn on turning over Roland's decision. I have a real heartburn, especially where it doesn't meet the zoning plans now. If you told me that it's going to be a 2-family, I would make that a zoning bylaw change. It seems like we could do that. If we could find a way to make sure that it was built up to safety standards, which Roland tells me he can't do, and we can't force, and Sherry says we can't force you to do, I could find a way to do that. But I have a real hard time to overturning Roland's decision, based on the information we've been given, the history of the property. It's giving me heartburn, because I don't want some elderly person trapped in a basement or trapped on a 3rd floor in a house fire where things weren't built the way they should have been. And there's no record of it being built the way it should have been. So that's where I'm at.
Mark?
I just want to clarify, because it sounded like earlier what we were discussing was either upholding or overturning.
Roland's decision, and
Roland's
that's what we're
decision.
doing.
Okay, now, about 3 or 4 minutes ago, we said, no, maybe the application is also for a variance. Can we clarify that? Because I can
They haven't
see a
come to us
scenario
yet.
where we uphold the decision that legally, looking at everything, it isn't a 3-bedroom. But we give the variance to make it a 3-bedroom based on grandfather or other reason. So, there's a scenario where we can have our cake and eat it too, so to speak.
I think
If
they
we
have to come back then.
If that was
Well, I don't know,
separate,
he's-
Two different issues.
Yeah, but is
As
the
I
application
understood,
asking for that?
as I understood Joe, he asked us to find either that Roland was wrong or that this is a pre-existing nonconformity. He didn't ask us to grant a variance, unless I'm reading your application.
That is correct, you're right.
You asked us to
You're right.
find that Roland was wrong in his determination, or...
I really don't even
or
think he's
maybe
wrong. He's doing his
because-
job.
Because it's a
Right,
pre-existing
right.
nonconformity.
Roland did his job. We cannot find permits that were taken out back in 78.
And-
So I'm really asking for a grandfathering use, for non-conforming use, and keep it the way it is. It's been that way for 40 years.
And if it's a pre-existing nonconformity, I just want to make the comment, Cheryl, that it is not an illegally created 3-family. If it pre-existed prior to zoning or was created in that period of time when multifamilies were being allowed in the town of Littleton, It's not illegal, it's a pre-existing
My
nonconformity.
heartburn is in
I know.
1995. They applied for a permit.
No, we didn't,
Permit.
Joe. Nothing happened in 95, but the tax code changed.
78
That
is
was
what
it.
you're looking at,
Yeah.
78.
So-
Ninety-four,
Sharon,
the tax
raise
No.
this-
Nothing
94, that's
happened.
it. That's all
That's
that
just the
happened.
tax
Nobody
change.
applied for a
One
permit
at a
back in
time,
95.
please,
Okay,
Joe,
I'm sorry.
one at a
You're
time.
right. 1978, the owner wanted to convert a single-family dwelling into 2 apartments, and
Rod-
didn't achieve the permit to do so for whatever reason.
And so maybe built 3 apartments because the multifamily was there, but Rod, go ahead.
So to define pre-existing, it's either during that time frame or before the bylaw
Yes.
changed in 1953.
That's how I would read it and how I would, and how I would think it can be argued, because successfully we've argued that time frame on a couple of other things, not this particular thing, but mostly it has to do with subdivision
So it
plans.
doesn't
yeah.
sound like either of those apply.
Why do you say neither applies? He says it was done when his father bought it in 78. It was immediately used, occupied, and continuously occupied as a 3-family, as a multifamily.
Without a building permit, we don't know when the conversion took place, after the fire.
Well, we have affidavits stating that we lived there as a multifamily in 1979
78, 79.
through 1983. I lived there
That's
personally.
what I'm having trouble with.
Yeah.
So-
This is the time period that would have been okay, and that's what I'm having trouble with.
But what if it was before 78?
That's what I'm having trouble with.
Well, it
he
couldn't be,
didn't-
because he didn't
he
own it
didn't
then,
own
sir.
it.
He didn't, there's a purchase deed in here showing he purchased it in 1978, then converted it, then rented it, and has been rented since then.
That's what I
So he
said.
converted it in 78, but he
When he
didn't get
purchased
any
it.
permits.
Apparently not, because we can't find any.
Joe, the
Yeah.
question from
Well,
Rod.
we have records from back then.
Joe, Rod's
We
got a
agree with
question. Oh, please,
Roland
Joe,
that we
wait.
can't find it.
Joe, wait. The question from Rod is, he thought a comment was made that it was a 3-family
for
when your
quite some-
father bought, when your
Right.
father bought it.
No, it was
No.
a single family that burned down that he made it into a multifamily after he purchased it in 1978. So the purchase deed's in here to show his first purchase, and then he converted it and started renting it, and so he's been renting it since 1979, all the way through present as a multifamily, a 3-family.
So it appears from between the fire, him buying the house, and the affidavits, that sometime between 78 and 79, it became a 3-family.
Yes.
Correct, sir.
Without
Correct.
permits.
Without permit, without
We
permit.
all
we
agree
all
it's
agree with
without
that.
permits.
Yeah, we all agree with that.
But we also think that in 77, 8, 9, that bylaw was in flux. I think those are the years. And there was multifamily in that bylaw, and it could have been done without permits in those days, because they didn't get permits for a lot of things in those days. Ergo the Jennifer Street properties.
But how can we turn?
The Jennifer
change
Street
into a
properties
definite?
have permits, don't they?
No.
Correct at Roland.
I haven't looked.
You sometimes can't, except with your affidavits.
But we
That's-
have dates. that
You
tell
know,
us
just
when
because a
it's been- when it
property was
renovated.
converted illegally, or there's no record of it being converted legally, doesn't make it right. I'm having a heartache. I hate to say no to people, but I'm just having a heartache
Mark,
with it.
you were in the middle, and I, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I brought up my point. I'm trying to figure out what it is we're deciding. Originally, it was either upholding or overturning Roland's decision, and then it seemed to morph into, or the additional thing was
Granting a
granting
variance.
variance.
Let me ask a question, just to clarify my own mind. If we uphold Roland's decision, then the applicant needs to go away and come back asking for a variance,
If he wants
Special
to, he
permit.
may not.
special permit.
Yeah.
No, it would be a
And it would
be a
variance for
variance.
3
Variance.
families.
And
Because
then,
only a 2-family would be allowed.
well, under a variance, we have the opportunity if we want. I mean, I know that we don't like doing something that's not allowed in the building code.
There's supposed to be a special hardship.
So the issue here, that there's special hardship may be the fact that it's been one since 78. And so therefore, you know, whether or not the code allowed it being built, if, you might argue that the code did allow it being built back in 78 into a 3-family. It should have had a building permit.
If you
Okay,
agree-
you're a bad boy, you didn't get one. Doesn't mean it wasn't,
Doesn't
didn't
mean
mean
he
it didn't.
couldn't have gotten
Didn't
one.
mean it didn't meet the zoning code when it was built.
Right.
Maybe not the building.
And
code.
John, if
But
Not
how do we-
building code,
how
but
do
the
we-
zoning code.
How do we determine, because it had no building permit, that it's not a giant fire trap?
come
And
inspect
that
it.
we are, by allowing them
No,
to rent it out
that's-
as a 3-family, we are
So.
endangering folks'
right.
lives, which
So-
is something we consider.
So we could ask the client to get an affidavit from an engineer who's qualified to either state that it does meet fire code requirements, or plans showing how they're gonna renovate it to meet fire code requirements.
I have a hard time putting that burden on them to meet today's requirements if it met them back in 78.
Oh, it didn't.
If he was gonna say, hey, I'm gonna revise it, do this, okay, now you gotta bring it up to code.
I think the fire separation
So
codes.
whatever it was.
I think the fire separation codes go back to 70.
They do.
Okay, I'm
and
not
we
saying
made
they
the house
don't, but I'm
down-
saying, let's look at those building
Yeah.
codes. If it still complies with back then I have a hard time saying you gotta update it.
Right down the street, so 3 doors down the street on the same side of the road, we told that guy that he had a 2-family, but only if he had put in fire separation.
But he was asking for
For a different thing.
different thing.
1 second, Roland
Right.
has
He
a
was asking to
comment
be
to this
grandfathered as a
discussion.
2-family.
Could I have a comment to this
I
discussion?
have 2 comments, and one to answer your question. If you had somebody go in, such as an engineer or an architect, to review, let's say, the building for current codes, obviously, every building in town doesn't meet a current code, it's brand spanking new. But what happens is, he comes up with, here's what I have, here are some, critical issues that we have, we probably don't have some critical separations, and he can recommend compliance alternatives, which the code is flexible in that manner, which I can accept. We can go that route, or whatever you choose to do. And I just wanted to make a point that I asked the applicant to come in for an appeal to my decision, because by coming in for a variance, he immediately is admitting guilt, and then he's begging you, or trying to establish hardship, which is, there is no hardship, so why would he come for a variance? I mean, that's why I asked him to do that. I didn't want him to be in that position where he had to establish a hardship, because I don't think there is one.
Well, the
After my
hardship can be
decision, it's
that
easier.
there's been 3 apartments there all along.
Jillian, you haven't spoken yet.
I mean, I really look at it like it's 2 separate issues that we're talking about. This is really just looking at Roland's comments and whether or not, based on the information he has, if he can make a determination if it isn't, and he can't. We're not asking for a variance, we're not asking for a special permit. I think it's 2 separate issues.
But this board can find that we disagree with Roland because notwithstanding the absence of material in the building file, this is a pre-existing nonconformity. We could find that. I'm not,
But if we
I'm hearing
choose-
that you don't want to. I am just establishing procedurally, especially for newer members, that the board can do that.
If we choose not to overturn Roland's decision, can we then move on to suggestions of ways that we could proceed in a way that would
No.
be favorable to the applicant?
No, but if he had to come back for a special permit or variance
variance.
later, we might be able to put some kind of conditions on it, I would assume.
Or we might be able to suggest that if he came back for a variance with an architect's or a structural engineer's papers in hand, that would be something we could see as a grandfather clause that might allow us to proceed.
I'm afraid that if you don't find that it's a pre-existing nonconformity in your decision today, you can't later say, oh, the architect says it's healthy and well, so now let's find it's pre-existing.
No,
You gotta make
he
a
hasn't asked
decision.
for a variance now. I'm
He's
not
not
willing.
asking for variance. He's asking this board to find that it's a pre-existing, non-conforming, 3-family structure. And when we
I
don't
can't
have it-
do that, so I'm
So
trying
you
to
don't
find a
have
way
to
through
do that.
it.
I'm just telling the board. The Jennifer Street ones, for instance, will probably also come up. I'm gonna take him out.
Go, take him out, and crawl around the end. So nicer than I would have done.
I'm just trying to flick him off.
But I'm thinking, in order to say it's a pre-existing condition, we have to know 2 things. The date range for that bylaw change and the date and when they,
They never
And I want something certain, I
really
don't want an
enacted that
I think.
bylaw change. They never picked areas on the town to
no,
do
we're
it.
saying, there was a bylaw that was apparently put into effect without a map, and then a bylaw, then it was removed. What are those 2 dates?
It
What-
wasn't active, yeah.
Yeah, and what date did they actually do the construction?
I could,
If we knew those 2 certain, then we could say, yes, it's not
I
conforming, or no,
can
it's
go
not.
upstairs and get the certain date. Is that what you
Sure,
want
why
to
don't we
do?
go
Either
ahead and
that or
talk
to
about
extend the
the,
hearing, continue the hearing to
But it's
the...
non-conforming because it didn't, I guess non-conforming, but it's non-conforming because it didn't have a permit, or non-conforming because, I'm trying to understand the non-conforming.
It's
part.
non-conforming because if the date is correct, I would argue, it's non-conforming because in a time period in which Littleton allowed multifamilies, which was a 2-year window.
Right, the 77 to 79, yeah.
But they never
you only
really
made
enacted
it a
it.
3-family. So it conformed
Right,
then.
but it still
It's
didn't
no
have a permit
longer
with it,
conform.
right?
but it still didn't have any permits
doesn't
or any
matter.
record of it. It does matter.
It doesn't,
I think the issue with regards to, it was a one-year period when the town went to town meeting and established a Zone A and a Zone B residential. But they never developed the map to show you where they were. And it is obvious that somewhere in town, and Jennifer Street is a perfect example, that's the only one I can point to, that actually built multiple family units, and then they stopped. The following year, it all stopped.
It all stopped.
They took it out of the bylaw and says, we're not going to do that anymore.
And Jennifer's were also not built with permits, correct?
I don't know, I'd have to go
No,
up
I
and look
think
at
they
it.
were. I've sold one of those, and I think there were permits, I gotta tell
I guess
you.
that's the thing I'm trying to understand.
I think this one was just done without a permit.
But regardless, it was, there was a point in time for about a year where the town didn't know what it was doing. And I can imagine the building inspector saying, what am I supposed to do with this multiple family thing you just passed? And probably started granting permits, and then finally the town went back and says, no, we're not going to do it, stop. So you have 1 year in limbo where nobody knew what they were doing in town.
Where it could have been granted if they applied for a permit as a
Now, it would be a
three-family.
whole lot easier if I had a building permit and said, yeah, the building inspector back then had granted a three-family dwelling, and we wouldn't be here today.
But there isn't one.
There isn't one.
but if they
And
built,
Jennifer Street does have permits.
well, you don't know that either.
I know
You
at
don't
least one has,
Well, you
because-
don't know all the ones on Jennifer Street, but that's, if they built this in 77, 8, 9, whenever that was, and it was a three-family legitimately then, I think we have to find that it's a pre-existing non-conforming.
That's a
And I don't
lot
know
of
this, and that's right, I don't know those answers.
So should we continue the hearing to next meeting and maybe Roland can get those dates for
I
us?
can get the dates
We
right
can
now.
get them right now if we hold
And
them
honestly,
out.
I think if you look at Jennifer Street and there's 5 houses over there built in families and none have permits as well, it could have
Said
been
this
the
Roland,
same
we
point
get
of
Jennifer
what they
Street
were
too
going
for
through.
us.
That-
Oh, no, I can't do that.
You can't do that?
I have to get her.
Go
I
help,
mean, if you have
please.
6 houses now without building permits, it would
Why are you
make
shaking
sense
your
that
head?
a lot of that was going on.
Because
we're
Jennifer
in
Street
limbo.
isn't before us. I'm using
No,
it,
but it's being used as an example.
That's-
And if we're going to use it as an example, and we're
It's
going to keep
not-
saying
it's
that
not
there aren't
before us.
permits for it, then you can't keep saying that.
because this decision about whether it's pre-existing or not is not driven by permitting. It's driven by history. And the history they presented you, you can believe it or not,
Permitting
is
is
four
part of the
affidavits.
history.
And there's no
There was-
permit, we already said
There was a
that.
building code in effect at that time, so there should have been permits for anything that was built in that time.
So my point is, if there's 10 houses out there that were all built in that time frame and none of them have building permits,
I don't know.
I don't
I'm
think
not- I don't
that's
have the
true.
you know what I'm
files.
saying? Then it's setting that we can see what may have happened during that time frame.
I agree with you, but I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the case.
At this point, I just want to poll the board so the applicant knows where everybody stands. So you seem to indicate that if the dates work for you, you could find your way to a pre-existing.
I could, but my concern is, the town says two-family, that's by right. We had an applicant come in a little while ago that wanted to go four-family. We said, no, why don't you go the 40B route and make one an affordable unit, and then it could become a friendly 40B. And now we're this is in the middle. And I'm concerned about setting a precedent, too.
Yeah.
Now, if they came for a special a variance, and we had certain arguments that would, say, okay, because of the location and everything else. And because of location, I'm not too concerned about the three-family. But I think that would be cleaner unless we can fall within these dates.
I want to see this.
I think we're all looking at a way to make this work for them. It's just not.
I'm sorry, darling.
And then,
Did you run up all 3 flights of stairs?
It was an elevator, right?
and
I thought I'd get a bathroom break.
Elevator. I know.
go ahead. Go ahead, because the whole argument is predicated on those dates.
Give me a minute.
I used to find it all now.
The dates. 1960 is when the residential A and B were established, but there was never a map to show where it was. And in 1961, they abolished it.
Oh,
They-
not in the 70s.
No, 1960 to 61.
Where do these 70 dates come from?
Nope, hang on. In 1960, residential A and B district was established. Residential B never existed. And in 1972, They abolished it,
60 to 72.
60 to 72.
Your dad bought it as a one-family in 78.
78,
He bought it as a one-family in 78.
Yeah.
burned out. Yeah.
So how can we do anything without them coming back at some point for variance?
So before we go further, does it make sense for you to go back and get an engineer to see if there is a satisfactory conclusion by Roland that there's fire safety adequate for 3-family? And then maybe the board and Roland together can figure out a way to
That you move forward.
legitimate it as a 3-family pre-existing and move it forward and satisfy Cheryl's concern for fire safety.
And is it also worth touching base with town council that if it's like 40 years or 30 years or 50 years, then it's by right, or it's grandfathered?
I would like,
Check with town council.
I'll
the
check on that
statute.
yeah, I would
10-year
want town
statute.
council's
Yeah.
opinion.
I'll,
My concern is, again, I think what you said, 2 families are allowed if the house is old enough. And so if they were coming asking for a 2-family and it wasn't, we might argue that that would at least fit the need. But we've already told one person that they couldn't, they didn't meet the 2-family rule, so it wasn't a hardship just because he just had signed a purchase and sale agreement on the property, doesn't mean we're gonna give him the
that
right to do
wasn't,
it.
that's a totally different story only because there isn't a 10-year history of 3-family.
I understand, but there is a history of, being a tenement and multifamilies living in the house for many, many years.
No, the history of that property was that unrelated adults were sharing housing, and it wasn't a 2-family. This has a real clear history of 3-family.
Being 3-family
So there's a
building, yes.
huge difference. And I think it's fair and fitting, thank you, Rod, that we just write a note to town council to express an opinion on the 10-year,
Well, that and
40A, 10-year, we're stopped from stopping it after 10 years. I just
Or
wanted to
whatever
get
the
an
years
opinion
are.
on that, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
then it's clean and we have.
Well, no,
the right
because,
for-
just because someone has done, I'm not saying you, okay, this is aside from you, this, in general. Someone uses their house, their single-family house as a three apartments, and does it for 10 years, doesn't make it legal.
It may, that's what we're
That's-
saying.
yeah, yeah,
Council
good.
may
It
say
does.
that 10
Might,
years.
that's why we're asking town council, tell us.
We're asking town council, is
48
there some
says
kind of a
it.
timeframe like
Yeah.
that? Because I know, you
Maybe
probably
it does
remember
make it
this,
legal.
the person squatting on land for a certain length of time,
an
or
10 years.
crossing land, would then, after either 10 or 20 years,
it's 10
would
years.
would maintain, 10 years would maintain that right
Yeah.
going forward.
Adverse
This may
possession
be a
is.
You
similar
let people walk
situation.
across the corner of your property for 10 years, they now have a right.
You don't take any
Yes,
action against
yes.
them.
We're not
I thought it
doing
was
that
20.
today, Mark. Mark, pull, we'll just continue pulling. I know your position's clear, but I'll hear it again if you want, but I want to just get the rest of the
I
boards.
just have a real heartache turning over Roland in this case, because I think it opens the door to all kinds of potential issues and problems. At the very least, the only way I can see a way forward for these folks is if they hired an architect, came back for a variance, and their hardship could be that it's been a 3-family for in excess of 10 years, came back with saying that this is a safe 3-family, the hardship is it's been that way, they inherited or bought it or whatever as that, and therefore we can grant the variance. I just can't see a way forward other than that.
Mark?
If the applicant agrees to the, added to the continuance, then yeah, I think touching base with town council, if it falls into that essentially 10-year statute of limitations, then it's a slam dunk.
Boy, am I nervous
But
about
we
that
can't,
one,
yeah.
because that would open the door to so many issues.
It's not us opening the door, it's 40A. I mean,
Yeah.
the Massachusetts general laws grants that exception. The question Roland had is whether case law and lawyers
There's
have
no
different
permits.
interpretation, so with no permits. So that's what I want to ask town council. And John?
I'm in the same spot. I mean, I think we need somebody else to tell us what the law says and whether or not we have a right to do it at all.
And Jillian?
I think we'd obviously like to do this for them, but it's just what's presented tonight's not the way to go about it. It's just finding a different way to do it. for
Let me
them.
ask it a different way. If town council confirms that there's a 10-year estoppel, is the board able or willing to take that information without the fire safety stuff? Or would the board have an easier time granting it if there was some recognition by an architect or an engineer that fire safety is
Two things.
is in the building with, as Roland said, not up to today's standards, but to standards that he deems to be suitably reasonable for that occupancy. Do you have an objection to doing that?
Could I ask the board to first check with council and get council's opinion
I'd
before we
like to get the
decide on
council
that?
action
Yeah.
in here. I
Before
don't
we
want-
decide to spend some money?
Exactly. But if town council comes back and says 10 years, 20 years that they're in, then this hearing isn't needed, Roland.
Yeah, the hearing goes away. If the
No,
town council,
exactly.
yes, it does, the town council says they're grandfathered because of this,
Then we don't grant a variance.
then we don't need a variance, it's done.
No variance, no variance.
They automatically have.
So we're not,
But we use that to
And the second
overturn
thing is-
the building commissioner's
I
decision.
am not going to
That's
over,
another
not without
decision in
fire.
front of us.
I don't think that town council's answer changes Roland's decision. Roland's decision is, there was nothing in my building permit file that says this was permitted. So if town council comes back, and I don't know what he's gonna say, but if he comes back and says, there's, mass law says 10 years, and it's, you don't have, the building inspector has no right to remove it, nor does it, I think there's a difference between whether an abutter can complain and whether building inspector can complain.
This issue
under
is
that statute.
complicated enough. If we're
So-
going to go by
Yeah.
town council, I want him to actually come in.
So if, one quick question, point. If the town council says they have the right, that still is not gonna solve their problem with their insurance company or the bank. Because the bank's then gonna go around and say, okay, you have a space, but now we need to have it approved by the town.
No, it
No.
would give us the opportunity to vote that we're overturning the building inspector only because town council
Right,
says
but
that
there's
it's.
no,
Right.
the insurance company's not gonna insure a piece of property that doesn't meet.
Of course they
It's
will.
done
They
an
won't know
insurance
that there's
issue.
any problems.
May I speak?
Yes,
If
They
town
won't.
council agrees,
They don't.
then the town council can give us a letter of compliance saying that it's grandfathered use.
Quite,
That's all I would need for that case, for the lender.
Yeah.
That-
And then we could
That's all I
choose-
need, for
Yeah.
the lender,
And
saying
we
the
could
town
choose to vote
agrees
it or not.
that the property is grandfathered use as a multifamily home. That's what we're here to get.
and if town council
This is-
says no to it, you've heard our
Exactly.
our board's place.
Then we can go the other route
Right.
and get an engineering opinion.
Madam Chair, this is a serious enough issue, opening doors up to all kinds of other problems in town. If we're going to take the town council's advice on this, I want the town council to come in and talk to us in person.
Okay,
And I think
also
that's a
as-
reasonable request.
And also as far as walls and so on go, I'm not sure that's our area, but Roland, when he inspects it, could find deficiencies and go that route.
And close it down?
Well, I don't know. Well, I'm not going to propose that. But what I'm saying is, he would do the inspection.
I don't think Roland can
and
do
just-
that.
I'm not, I don't know.
Then why is he
You could
inspecting
find deficiencies?
multi-family units?
Okay, so
Versus us demanding that they put a firewall.
So what is the inspection of multifamily used for?
inspections for any building, which I have to do annually, churches, hotels, swimming pools, is for public safety. I primarily look at the fire detection system. I look at the heating system. I look at the electrical system. I look at the means of egress, but I'm not testing
You're not looking at fire,
firewalls.
well, there's no way you can tell the firewall without
There's
making
no
holes.
destructive inspections
Yeah.
done.
And we won't either be able to.
No.
Without drilling holes in the wall to find out what the wall board is.
But my point is, if they can go this variance route, can we just put a requirement on that?
If they come back for a variance, we can condition the variance on anything we want. But that's not what's before us.
No, I know, it's just curious.
And relative to bringing town council before the board, I think that the letter is simple. We're simply going to ask town council to interpret Massachusetts general laws on the, I forget what it's called, estoppel or whatever it's called.
It's called statute of limitations.
Statute of
and there's
limitations.
Two types. There's zoning and there's building.
I think the
We're
issue
gonna
is
ask town
complicated
council to
enough.
interpret it for us. If it comes back here and it's still complicated in his letter response, then we can ask him to come in. We don't have council in our budget. We have to petition the selectmen to allow us to bring council in, and I don't think the issue is that complicated, Cheryl.
I think it is, and I think the ramifications going forward are, I mean, I can come up with half a dozen houses in this town now that have illegal apartments that have been there more than 10 years.
And when they come up before us, we'll decide then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we
We're
grant, if we do
implementing,
that,
not
this,
setting.
then, if
But government inspector's gonna take 10
town
minutes to
council
look at the
says
law
that
and
they're
say it is
grandfathered,
or
then
not.
suddenly all of them are grandfathered.
Town council.
We're not asking him on the other ones. You've got to look at it.
Carol.
I would just like to make sure we understand why we've even gotten to this point. We're just trying to sell this. And it's-
Nobody's objecting to that,
And
Carol.
it's the bank of the buyer that's questioning, is it a one-family or a three-family or a two-family?
Because they don't want to have to do what you're doing.
Yeah, so if you sold it as a
Right.
one-family, all thing would go away, but then as soon as someone tried to make it into a three-family.
But if I sell it as a
then-
one family, it degrades the purchase price.
I understand, and that's why, and so you're trying to sell as a three-family, and that's what they want, the bank's concerned
Yeah.
that if all of a sudden the new person shows up and he gets in trouble and has to convert it back to a one-family, then.
No, we understand, that.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but
I just
we're
want to
only
make sure everyone
asking-
understands why we're even
Yeah.
here is because of the buyer's bank, and that we've proven it's been used this way for so many years. We've been paying taxes on it since '95 as a multifamily. If this board or the town council determines that it's not a multifamily, then what does that do to us?
You're either going to have to sell
Do
it
I
as a-
file a suit against the town because?
No,
they've
it
been-
doesn't work that
You can't
way.
file a suit against the town. If you're not a legitimate three-family, then your occupancy has violated the town's bylaws. What you have the right to do, if the decision here is unfavorable, or if town council's
Right.
determination is unfavorable, you have a right to convert this to a two-family by coming back to us, and it's almost as of right, it's a special permit for a two-family because the building was built before the 50s. However, in that instance, then you would be required to conform to current building code for a two-family. Or you could come back to us and ask for a variance for a three-family, basing your hardship on the fact that you've been three-family all these years.
Okay.
And if you did that, I still think the building inspector would require you to conform to building code. But I heard him say tonight.
Today's building code?
No, I heard him say tonight that he would be reasonable in getting as close as you can to compliance on an older structure, right?
There's a section of the building code that says compliance alternative. And if the applicant wishing to convert this into, let's say, a two or three family, they provide a compliance alternative, I'm supposed to approve or deny it, and if I approve it, I send that compliance alternative to the state. And then we resolve it and we move on.
We're trying to find a way
What's the
forward for you.
alternative?
We
What's
really are.
Compliance alternative, I don't know.
Doesn't feel that way.
Just
I'm
for
sorry.
instance, Joe, what I've heard when I've gone to the state for different things, for instance, if a firewall is required from the basement all the way up to the roof rafters, and you can't get there because of the way the roof is pitched, you might be able to get it as far as you can get it, and then put something like a double sheetrock or a fire safety sheetrock on the angle.
Got it, okay.
Something like that is
All right,
alternative
all right.
compliant,
Okay.
right?
Okay,
Roland?
makes sense, makes sense.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
We're not trying to penalize you, we're just trying to find a way forward that's safe and makes sense for the town.
I guess, and I'm trying to figure out where I stand. If this sale doesn't go through because of the finding of this board, then I'm responsible on behalf of my parents for a building, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it now.
Whoever converted it to the three-family should have gotten permits. That's
That
the
sale-
bottom
that-
line.
That has sailed.
That
We
should
know
sail.
we don't have
That's
permits.
where the problem started.
We know we don't have
Right,
permits.
we
So we're
understand
trying to
that.
get
So
around
let's
that.
You
not,
sell it
Carol,
as a
let's not
one-family,
go
the
there.
problem goes
Carol,
away.
this board isn't the board to tell you what you can do with your property if it's not a three-family. Let's not go there. What we need to know is, can you withstand a month's delay on what you're doing here? Because the board only meets once a month.
And this is vacation in July is coming up.
Yep.
And in July is as soon as we can meet.
So we're gonna lose the buyers, but I don't know what else to do.
And the only exception to that, I would think, is that if town council comes back and says that the statute of limitations applies here, that won't change your determination, but it would probably generate a letter that would let you go to the bank and say the statute of limitations applies,
That's where we-
notwithstanding that there's no
That's what we
permit in the
That's what I
file.
need.
That's all you
That's what I need.
So maybe we can get
If
that.
we can try
ask
that.
the building
If that doesn't
inspector,
work, then
Shelley,
I
maybe,
don't know where
to
we
give
go.
us an answer within a week to 10 days, maybe. Because if that letter comes back in your favor, maybe that will solve your problem.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's continue to a time and
Oh,
date
yeah.
certain.
The other hearing was 7:20.
Yes, so make a motion for
Okay,
7:30.
we continue the hearing to 7:30 on July 19th.
Second the motion, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you.
We continue to July 19th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll come back 2 days before that. Okay. Let's go back to Shelley.
Trying to get my internal clock back.
I think all of you did a very good, really a very good job with your input on that. And, caring for the applicant and
The bottom line is, if you
and the
look,
state.
I applied for the building permit, it's been denied. Well, is that,
We'll talk, we can talk after. but we gotta talk after.
Yeah. Okay, at this point, we have on the agenda, Roland wants to talk to us about his comments to the senior residential bylaw.
Actually, we have two requests. The first one was, oh, thank you, what was the other one?
Did everyone get a
Home
chance to read this?
occupation and also the new accessory apartment. We can start with either one of them.
Let me start with accessory, because I'm roaring on that one.
All right. So what we did at the request of the planning board was come up with some modifications to the existing accessory apartment to make it more workable for us, because at the present time it's a little bit confusing, not only for us but the applicant. Let me just say from the very beginning, I think we could have modified our existing bylaw a whole lot easier by taking out a couple paragraphs and inserting a couple lines than to do what we just did here. But we have what we have, and so we've decided that we have noted in red and blue here some suggestions as to how we would like it modified, and maybe you could either look at it or take it home, or...
Did everyone get a chance to read it over?
Can I ask if you went through this with the planning board yet?
No.
We went through it with Ed Mullen.
Yes, Ed Mullen.
Because feedback I'm getting is that Mark Montanari is now chair, and Mark Montanari agrees with you that modifying the earlier bylaw and throwing this out completely is a better way to go. And I don't know if that's what the board's going to try to do.
Interestingly, I looked online for accessory apartments, and I found similar language throughout the state. So I have to assume that the state is pushing cities and towns to go this route for whatever reason that the state wants to do this, because it satisfies something at the state level.
It's clearly what she represented, Judy, when she presented it.
Okay.
That this is what they're doing all over the state and what the state recommends. as
Doesn't work
language.
great. The city of Newton has a better law than we have. I read theirs. Theirs is more complex, too. My idea of a good bylaw is something that the people, the residents of Littleton understand, not just me and not just Shelley. So if we can make it simple. I like the old bylaw. The bylaw was simple. Presently, with this bylaw, you're penalizing those that want to have in-law apartments and have in-laws live with them. We have a case going on now where they can have an in-law apartment because we have now an accessory apartment bylaw, which now creates a firewall and now creates an upgrade to the septic system. And they're kind of like their jaws dropped and said, we got to do what? We just want our parents to live with us. Our bylaw previously addressed that, and it regulated it every 3 years. We checked with all these units and said, are you still doing it? And if
Right.
not, cease it and move on.
And then it had a door in between the house and the
Well,
apartment.
that wasn't in the law. That's something I did to satisfy the building code. If you made it a communicating door and you were
Says that
able to
again,
move
another
it inside,
access.
I call it the Ernie Bach law, something that was satisfied many years ago.
Okay, shall we, understanding that you may have wasted your time, and we may be wasting ours, but can we go ahead with what you've done here? Because I'd like to go through it.
Sure, well, Shelley's the one that put it together.
Okay.
And we sat with Ed Mullen for about an hour, and we went through this with Ed, and he seemed to agree with the changes we have.
Okay, so one of the problems we've run into is people putting an addition on that also has an accessory apartment in it. How did you address that in here? Is that where D, an accessory apartment shall not exceed And why lesser of 40% of the gross floor area?
Because it conflicted with C1 above with the 15%. We had to come to an agreement that you're allowed to increase the volume of your house by a certain bit, and then, once you did that, the accessory apartment could not exceed more than 40%.
Of
Of that
the
area.
increased volume.
Of the whole volume?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's what I think Dee Dee used to say, something, somewhere it needs to say that
higher.
that 40% of gross floor, the gross is the new gross.
So that's
It's up higher.
definitions at the end, it adds a definition for
Oh, okay.
accessory apartment gross floor area.
So, construction shall not create more than 50% increase in the gross floor area of it, and then you're saying of that 15%, only 40% of it can be?
But
or
then, once you have the
40% of entire house?
15% incorporated, you take the whole house, and 40% can be dedicated to the accessory apartment.
But
Or
that does not
1,200,
include attic
whichever is
space.
smaller.
1,200.
And that does not include
No.
attics anymore?
Wait, it does.
No.
If you read
No, it
the
doesn't.
definition.
That's- no.
Habitable space including basement, first floor, second floor, and garage. Exclude attic, deck, and
Right,
porch.
okay, that's what I got.
I wanted something in there about like a living floor space.
Well, the definition is the last thing here you can look at.
What we did way back when we established the in-law apartment bylaw, I came to this board, just like I'm doing now, and I asked them, so what do I base this on? And we came up with this definition, and I have kept this all these years, and I thought we would incorporate it into this one here.
Your gross floor area.
Yeah.
Okay, so skipping ahead to I, are we ready to skip ahead to I, or does anyone have any questions between that? If not, I'll go on. Certificate of occupancy for accessory apartments shall be issued for a period of 3 years, or upon transfer or renewal of certificate of occupancy should be granted only upon documentation the accessory apartment complies. So are we saying now that we have to go back to a relative or
No.
dependency?
No.
I'm confused about the 3-year deposit.
Shelley and I are going back and forth on this, and we were talking about it tonight. And I said, if I don't recognize accessory apartment, I recognize a single family or a two-family. And so if we agree that this is a single family, then I don't need if it's a two-family, I don't need to verify it every 3 years. But if we make it an accessory apartment, or if we fall back into the accessory apartment bylaw, then we have to have some way of regulating that and making sure
Oh,
that it
you're
remains.
saying the ones that are grandfathered, not the ones that are being built now with the
Yep.
firewalls and,
Or even if we went, if, let's say, Mark Montanari wanted to go back to the old bylaw, somewhere we have to include in-law apartments. We have to help these people out. We're struggling right now. We have one today, and, it's just like they're just pulling their hair out.
so this is a way to put the old in-laws back in.
But it's not putting it back in. But what I'm hearing you say is, if it's truly an in-law with a familial relationship,
Yep.
it doesn't have to have the fire separation.
It doesn't have to have the fire
communicated door,
separation.
But then
Right.
it
Doesn't
needs
have to
3-year
have-
review.
And it
Exactly.
doesn't require
An
a
upgrade.
2-compartment septic tank, which under this new bylaw, because it's no longer considered a single-family dwelling, it does. And that's what's
for
the
new
problem with
construction.
the people that are trying to truly do an in-law apartment, that it's a mom or dad living there, and they're forced to, their septic system is big enough, but because under the Title V definition, it's no longer a single-family dwelling.
Then we need a clause from the old
It is,
bylaw.
So that's putting that in here, and that makes sense, thank you.
So
We needed
Mark
that.
really is interested in kind of, I mean, our theory from the beginning has been, do this accessory apartments, allow it in detached, but let's just call it what it is, they're 2 families.
Yeah.
And then modify this accessory apartment to be in-law apartments, which is what they are.
Verified every 3 years.
But the problem with that I struggle with, versus if they did it as this 2-family thing, 3 years, 5 years from now, the parents are gone.
Yep.
They have the space, they can't, and they're gonna wanna rent it.
Then they
probably
can
do
come
rent
here
it.
and ask for a
Convert it at that
conversion, and we can tell
Yeah.
them to put the firewall in, and we're off and running.
Okay, as long as there's a path.
But that's why we asked for the
get to
3-year
this.
check, so that we make sure that somewhere along the line, we know when you stop having an in-law, we now tell you, now you have to convert this to a
But
two-family.
without this, they can't do that. With this, they can.
Right.
Yeah.
I would give you an example of a house that I rented and sold, where it was a split entry. The downstairs had been made into an in-law apartment. The parents had passed away. The owners then rented it out.
while the parents were alive and living down there, the stairway was kept open, and the parents could, the children came down and checked on the parents, and it was another means of egress for the parents. When they rented it out, they put a bureau in front of it, that door. That means of egress was no longer available. The only quote, means of egress now was the windows. It's split entry, it had big windows, but the only emergency exits were the windows then, which if it was an elderly person could be a real problem. And so, you gotta walk the line there.
Yeah.
And I see what Roland's trying to do, he's just trying to protect people.
So on 59, Roland, when you're not going to grandfather, shouldn't we call it what it is? They could be grandfathered, even if they're expired, they could be grandfathered as long as they go back to a familial relationship. And they could be grandfathered, but
No,
they
because
have to
that
have
doesn't
the
exist
separation
anymore.
wall. Well, we're going to put it back in.
Oh, yeah.
You-
See, a lot of this
your eye-
goes away if we.
No, but it has to go back in for I to work. You're not going to have a 3-year review if it converts to a full two-family.
But that's what we just said. We talked about this tonight, that if we're calling it a two-family, then I comes out. The problem being, we have to be able to track these, because there's reports I have to do for the state
I got
every
it.
year.
I got it.
And the way the bylaw's worded now, there's no oversight anymore, so there's no way to track them, which is why we came up with it, that we have to have some way to know where these are.
The only problem I'm hearing from experience is, we want housing for people that need affordable housing, especially for elders. And if I already have a unit created, and it becomes vacant because my parent died, but it's years before I go and sell the house, you're saying that I have to go through
A building permit.
a building permit and fire separation walls
And the septic tank.
and the septic tank, which could be a huge expense at that point, so.
A little unfair to the building code and to the next occupant to say that, yeah, I had an in-laws here, and now I'm gonna sell it as a
But now you're
two-family.
renting it out, so
No,
you
but
have
what I
rental.
want to do is sell it to a new person with an in-law without going through that.
Well,
fire
then
separation
quickly
wall.
Then they
becomes
fill the
legal.
form in that says they're still using it as an in-law.
But
If
this
they're
says,
using
no,
it
you
as a
said it
rental-
expires after.
No,
No, it
this,
says-
what this says is the present ones that we have that have expired, let's say 6 or 7 years ago, they no longer have their special permit. They're no longer eligible for the protection. Those that came into this new law actively
Correct.
having an in-law, they're grandfathered. They just
Grandfathered.
walk right in and they're all set.
But
I didn't
also,
follow you just
no,
now.
but I think what she's asking, if I can simplify, is if someone had an in-law
Yes.
and they moved, say they picked up their whole family and they
Yep.
moved to California, including taking their relatives with them.
Yep.
Now there's a single-family house with an
Yep.
in-law.
Single-family house.
Right.
It's a
With an
single-family house
No,
because
because it
But
ceases
surely-
at the change of ownership under the old bylaw.
But surely, another family could buy it with a functional dependency,
Yep.
immediately get a permit, and move on happily, right?
He's saying not under the new bylaw.
Well, no. Oh, not under this one, no, it doesn't
But the
exist
way,
yet.
that's the way he's rewriting it, is that you could then get the permit back and move on.
If we had kept the old bylaw, we could have,
I'm asking you to put that back in.
yeah.
That's what I'm asking you to do. I get that if it's a two-family without the functional dependency, I get all the stuff you argue about fire safety and all that, I have no problem with that. I have a real problem not being able to get another family in there with a relative or a
Exactly.
parent or an adult kid that they need to house.
Under the old bylaw, if that
Yeah.
were to expire and they went away, a new family bought it, they'd simply come back to the board and say, we're reactivating
We
the
need to
special
get
permit.
that back in.
All right.
And
I think we should go
that's
back and
critical.
probably pull out the accessory bylaw that we had before too.
Yeah,
Try to
and
work
Mark's
with it.
willing to work with that.
And I think Mark's
that's the
willing
law.
to work with it. I think, I think that Ed Mullen had good intentions and was desperate to get a senior residential bylaw to satisfy the elders that were in this community crying for it. So we started, and this is the start of the process. Now we have to fine tune it. Yeah.
So I thought that this did put it back in, you're saying it doesn't, we need to fix that.
Needs to get back in, yeah.
I think the language has to change a little bit, because as I read it here, it's confusing. I think we have to, we'll work on it.
And then,
But doesn't 173A allow it, interior units the applicant was complying with all of the requirements of
173 what?
17360, accessory apartments by special permit.
Again, it says you have to go through A through,
Must comply with all 17358.
You know,
Which is
if
A
Mark's
through H,
willing to kind of work off the old one, most of this changes, so let us, I would say, meet with Mark and draft up some more notes for the next time,
Yeah.
because
there's a great,
there's definitely a way to do it that's workable, that makes it work for people that truly want to just keep having in-laws, and that people to have rental units.
Yeah.
You can do it, but this doesn't work, and it's
Yeah.
really affecting the people that are trying to just have an in-law apartment, and it's making it economically unfeasible.
So 20 years from now, they're going to say, back in 2018, that for 2 years, they passed this bylaw that allowed anyone to do everything, and
Well, fortunately, there's only been 2 applications, so.
well, what she's saying is probably there's 10 that did it without applying.
And our board, 10, 20 years from now, is going to be asked to rule that those are legal to families.
Difficulty I have,
I know, I won't.
the difficulty I have dealing with zoning is that the building code is so much more clear. It doesn't recognize accessory apartment or in-law apartment. You're either a single family, a 2-family, or 3-family. Very, very clear. All right, but we're kind of like trying to bend the rule in zoning and make it work.
Done yet, we had to.
I know, we
We had to do
talk
home
about
occupancy.
But he knows who we are. He knows my name.
We're trying to help people who
Oh, what did I say?
really want to have a separate.
she's mad because I'm collecting names.
Oh.
Okay, home
I wanted to give
occupation.
you your time.
Home occupation.
I don't want to rush you.
No, I want to get out of here, too. The home occupation, I guess I need some clarity from the board as to what your limit is on home occupation. Is a home occupation, office of professional persons residing on premise, handicrafts, hobbies, or activities of a similar nature? Does that include a gentleman with a pickup truck and a trailer and a lawnmower? Pickup truck, trailer, and a lawnmower and a backhoe? Or a bobcat and an employee? Can he have a bulldozer? Can he have a backhoe, 6 dump trucks? I mean, where is your limit? Where do you draw the limit? Because we have all of that in this town.
If you have 6 backhoe and 6 dump trucks, I think there's only 1 rear end for every seat. So how many people do you have coming to move that equipment? That's more than one.
That's not true, though. I mean, you can have multiple pieces of equipment and only use one a day.
Okay. The other question I have for you, and this has bothered me this week, we don't have anything in our bylaw for contractors' yard. And if
So
you're
right
going
here.
to stop those contractors from having their equipment in their yards, where are we going to put it without a contractor yard bylaw?
So I left my notes upstairs, but Shelley and I were discussing this evening, and we came up with the possibility of including in the definition, office of professional persons residing on premise, blah, 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 contractual services similar to blah, 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 provided they only have one additional employer. Put some limitation on contractual services. That's your electricians, your HVAC guy that drives his van home, your landscaper who only has his truck and his trailer. These small-time businesses that can't afford truly commercial space,
And we want to allow those.
and we want to allow them. And
We don't want 12 trucks parked starting
Again,
at
I'm
5
asking-
o'clock.
Employees driving in and
I'm
out
trying to
of it.
find a way to,
That's
where's the bar? Where do I stop?
Yeah.
Because
Because
we're
people
going
who
after
buy in
these.
a residential,
Those properties
residential,
exist in town with a big
Right,
barn out back
but
with all
when
of
he's
that.
driving
Right.
People who,
Yes,
there's a lot of
Ross's
them,
house
and that's
is
why
far.
before we
Ten
start
times parking
sending all
in the
these
street,
letters out and sending
getting
them all to
company
you,
vehicles
we
to
want to
drive
know
off, yeah.
your thoughts.
there's a difference between the big business and the quiet family man who uses his barn out back and doesn't leave his trucks parked everywhere.
So the question is, right now, under our present home occupation bylaw, I send everybody to you. I just suggested some language, maybe. Is that the course of action we want to do, is change some of the language?
Contractor services in the
Contractor
home
services,
occupation.
we got to limit it in a small manner, but contractor services. That'll, the people that cut wood. And we also have to be sensitive to the fact also, because I have some places in town where you have small-time contractors with big-time operations on their property, like cutting wood. And it's such a dense area of town that the residents that are surrounding this are like, this has got to stop.
But isn't that the noise pollution
Yeah.
bylaw? Does that cover it? I don't know.
Does it? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's a good question. I mean, it's,
I wanted an answer tonight.
And there's a difference between 5-acre farms.
We don't have that.
Yeah, but we live quite a ways.
We haven't adopted that.
And the dog hears it.
I think you have to be guided by the employee rule, for sure,
But
as
then how
Mark
does it work
said.
if someone's been doing that for 25 years on their property?
Doing what?
Oh, are you talking about something that might be grandfathered, even though it wasn't permitted? That's what I thought I heard you say.
Honestly, I mean, it's all, you know what I mean?
But what happens is, we're gonna go out and we're going to cite them, and they can come and state their case before this board.
Well, then they
I'm
have to
black
do
and
that.
white, I just look at it and say, you're in violation, see ya.
That's all you can do.
That's all, then they have to come do it. But I think your idea of using contractual services makes sense.
So
Your
what are
idea
you
of using
proposing
contractual
as a
service
limit
makes-
to the number? Essentially,
One
what
employee,
do you,
it's always
one
been.
employee driving in and out?
I think we ought to stay with one additional employee. That works. Do we put a limit on equipment? Maybe store equipment, no outside storage of bulk material, similar to our commercial bylaw. You got to screen it or put it in the building. Again, all these visions are
There's
coming
a
into my
difference
head of all these
between
people that are
there's
in
a difference
violation.
between a dump truck that gets driven home and is started at 4 o'clock in the morning and left idling as a diesel, and someone driving home their work
Pickup truck,
van.
Their
Yeah.
ban,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
there's a big difference between those two in noise pollution.
There's a difference though, but what if that's that person's only vehicle, that's all he uses? You look at the twins down on Russell Street, they drive trucks around, that's all they do. And that's their truck, that's what they drive home.
But we
They
gave-
happen to
we
be in a
gave them the
commercial
permit.
area.
We
Huh?
gave him the permit to build that
Yeah,
building.
yeah, I know, but what if that was in a residential area? He drives his truck home.
I think it's more than just a number, because I have
That is residential.
plumber guy, near me, and never been an issue.
Right.
He has a truck,
Right.
keeps it out back. He
Right.
may have a couple employees that
Yep.
park the car, get in the truck and drive
Yep.
away. And because the stuff is in the back, but maybe he has 2 employees, I'm not sure.
Right.
It's not an issue, so it's not just the
We didn't
number of
find him
people, it's where they
grandfathered.
keep the
We
equipment.
found
and
him
the
not
impact on the
in, we did not
neighborhood.
grandfather.
Just not to get off subject, I was also thinking, and this probably goes hand in hand
Did not
of
grandfather.
attempting to go down the nuisance bylaw that was attempted a few years ago, and that failed. And I think the reason why it failed was the formula they used at the tail end to determine, what was a nuisance and what wasn't. It was volume, and you can't do that in this town, because on Gristmill, volume of offensive material may be small, but in another part of town, it may be big. And so, I have another formula in my head, and I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
And we're still living with those 2 places.
Well, we would be happy
Drive by every
to
day.
listen to your formula.
Okay.
Put your formula on
That was an
paper.
overrule of his decision.
On pre-existing, I think. I just want to
I'll
see
pull
the
it out,
decision,
yeah.
yeah.
On Keith Carroll?
right.
We
What is
didn't
it?
grandfather it, we just overruled his and told him not to come back, not to put himself in a position
Yeah.
that he had to come back before us because we would not be able to
Plug in pictures,
overturn
everything.
Roland's decision again
Yeah.
for,
Well, so we'll work on some wording for that and send it out for you to look at.
we
Probably
had a
you
big
and,
discussion on
the
spot
planning board.
zoning and how we didn't want to
Right,
do that. We
right,
had a
right.
big discussion on how that could become a gas station. We did not grandfather. We just overturned Roland and said, we're turning a blind eye, don't come back before us. Keith Carroll.
And I think he's actively looking for another spot. So,
And his neighbors all adore him.
well, I adore him. and
It doesn't mean it's legal.
No, but he does do a very good job of keeping it in the barn and out of sight.
Yeah, I know.
I drive by it occasionally.
You have to
You
understand,
can't-
long before he existed there, I knew the original owner that built the nursing home and that lived there. It was Tommy Boyle's brother, Bobby Boyle.
And he took,
I looked at all that stuff, and there wasn't, that was supposed to be associated with the apple orchard back then, and all that was gone.
well, he ran that whole construction outfit out of that
Yes,
house
he
for a long
did.
time, yeah.
That's why I was there.
Are we ready to
Move we adjourn?
call it a
Well,
night?
we have to, I'll move that we adjourn.
I just did that.
Oh, I second that.
Ron John,
All those in favor?
fighting over motions tonight.